Baltimore. Don't ask him about preseason games, oh no. Stuffing things in Griffin Basso. Despite it being on the internet, he can call it what he wants, so Glenn Clark Radio. Glenn Clark Radio. Glenn Clark Radio. Duke sucks.
And a happy Friday morning to you. It is Glenn Clark Radio. I'm Glenn. He's Griffin. Good to be with you. Got a lot to do over the course of the next couple of hours. In just a couple of minutes, I'm going to share some reflections on the life of our friend John Feinstein, who you probably know passed away yesterday. And I'll get there. Also, a little bit later on this hour, the great Gary Williams is going to join us to talk about John. We'll also talk some hoops as well with Coach. Speaking of Gary Williams, one of his former players, Duane Simpkins, is now the head coach at American, and they won the Patriot League and are headed to the NCAA tournament. Kind of similar to how Gary Williams started his coaching career once upon a time. So we'll catch up with Duane. Tremendous human. Love that guy, and really happy for him. Also this morning, we'll do some football. We will have our weekly NFL draft segment. Our buddy Kyle Stackpole, who, as I always remind, once upon a time interned, and now look at how much more successful he is than us. Kyle covering the NFL draft for CBS Sports. He'll join us to talk about his new mock that he has out. And then Jonas Schaffer will check in with us. Jonas, I guess we're going to talk football. I'm sure he'd rather talk Maryland basketball, but we'll talk to Jonas about what the Ravens have and have not done here in the first week of the offseason. So all that. Oh, and this week in the rest of baseball, all coming up on a Friday edition of the program. All right. I was in Arizona in 2006, and I had read John Feinstein's work and listened to John Feinstein and had him on shows that I had here, but didn't know John Feinstein personally. Like, he came on, on ESPN 1300 and on Ed's show, promoting books and things like that, but I didn't know John Feinstein. I had met him at Maryland basketball games, but I didn't know him. And I remember being in Arizona, and I left the station that I was at with some buddies of mine. The reason why I had gone out to Arizona, I had gotten an offer to go over to the sports station in town, and I was going to be producing an afternoon show and helping to host a midday show. It was a lot. But the more important part of the role, as I was told, was like they were paying me, and I was young, good money, with the focus being this afternoon show. Like they got me to go do it in part. They don't know as the money really probably would have been enough, but they offered me the hosting gig to make sure they could get me. But the crux of the job was it's a highly competitive afternoon radio market in Phoenix. We need to step our game up. And we were up against these monstrous shows. There was a show called Gambo and Ash that was on KTAR in Phoenix, and it was like that every day the Suns acquired Shaquille O'Neal, and they had him on the show that day. Like it was a monstrous show.
Jeez.
And they said, we need someone that can help us compete. And I was like, all right,
So Glenn Clark, of course.
Sure, yeah. And they were willing to pay me well, and I was this 23-year-old kid, and I was like, all right, let's do it. Like, let's, me, I was up for the challenge. I didn't have a family at that point. I had the time. They were really impressed by. I had a coffee with them, and Michael Bidwell, the son of Bill Bidwell, the owner of the Cardinals, who's now, since Bill Bidwell passed away, has become the primary owner of the Cardinals. But he was in the coffee shop, and they were like, how would you get him on the show? I was like, I just go pro, and I did the whole spiel, and they were like, oh, that's interesting. And then they watched me go book him for the other show that I was working on at the time. We finished our meeting, and I just said, he's here, let me try it. And I walked over, and I said, Michael, my name's Glenn Clark. I'm with 101.5 Free FM in Phoenix, and, the whole thing. We're new to the Valley, and we'd really like to. And he gave me his card. I said, would you be willing to come on? He said, well, I got to make sure PR is okay with it, but I'd be happy to do it. I was like, awesome. Now, it wasn't very popular. The Bidwell family was not popular in Phoenix. They were not. They were a moribund franchise. I mean, it wasn't like it was a huge, but it was still that impressed them. They gave me the job. So I'm there for a little bit, and they always wanted to see. They always kind of wanted to test me. You can't get this person. You can't get so and so. You can't get. And some of them, they were right? Like, just because of relationship. I would say it was really pleasant working in Phoenix because the teams were great to work with. Like, this is also a different era of radio.
Almost 20 years now.
Yeah, right? Like, they were easy to work. They would let all of us come broadcast from the facility during the draft. Not just their flagship, but all of us. And then Ken Wisenhunt would come sit with all of us. Like, we would, they'd make the pick, then they'd trot Ken Wisenhunt out, and I'm trying to remember who was the GM at the time because it wasn't Steve Keim. It was Steve Keim was a draft guy for them at the time. I don't remember who the GM would have been. Maybe Rod Graves was the GM at that point. And they would just, like, move from station to station. Like, all right, Wisenhunt on this one, Graves on this, and they would just move them. Now you here, you here. That was just the way that it worked. Like, it was very cooperative, and it was very pleasant. And they'd be like, one of the guys that I was on the show with was born in Philly, and he was like, I've always wanted to have Pete Rose on my show. And I tracked down Pete Rose and got him. And they just got to the point where they were like, so you can just do anything. And I remember, like,
Rod Graves?
Yeah, Rod Graves. That's what I said. Okay. Is that who it was?
Yes, that is.
Look at that. But it was so funny, and I don't know why this was such a big deal, but I remember two of them that the host of this show gave me, like, a challenge. Like, you can't get this guy on. Ironically, were two people that became two of my better friends in this business. The first was Jim Nantz.
They said you can't get Jim Nantz.
Said, you can't get Jim Nantz. We've tried to get Jim Nantz 100 times. Now, again, at the time, I was not friends with Jim Nantz the way that I am today. Like, today...
Like, you didn't know.
I didn't know him at all.
Okay.
I didn't have any relationship with Jim. I'd never talked to him before. But I knew what I was doing. Like, I was very good at this. And so, that week, like, on Friday, we had Jim Nantz on the show. And these guys were just blown away. They were like... Okay, I think they gave me a raise after that.
Wow.
Like, they were so impressed by, of all people, Jim Nantz. It was so random. We could have Amari Stoudemire call in, and they wouldn't be as impressed as they were that I got Jim Nantz on the program.
Because Amari Stoudemire was easy.
Yeah, these were golf guys. Like, these were... Gotcha. And because they were golf guys, one of the ones, they were like, I get sick of Gambo and Ash always have John Feinstein on, and we never have John Feinstein on. I was like, do you want John Feinstein on the show? Like, I'll call him because I knew him from a little bit, but we weren't friends. And I remember calling John to book him on their show for the first time. And I remember John saying, "Oh, right, you, Glenn." I remember, like, he was, and then he said something like, "Well, how come you haven't called?" Like, I'm telling him what I'm doing now. I'm like in Phoenix. He's like, "Well, you haven't called me." And I was like, how do you know that? Like, how do you're on every show. Like, how do you know that, like, that? He's like, I haven't heard from you at all. And it just sort of blew my mind. And I said, well, would you be willing to come on? He's like, I'll come on whenever you want me. And so then it became that show, the show that I was doing. I had another Saturday morning show that I had to do on that radio station. And John started coming on frequently. Like, it was just a go-to because I knew he would do it. And then it was hilarious because I got back to Baltimore, and Drew was so golf-obsessed that we had a standing agreement that John would come on the week of every major championship. That he said, if you want it every week, you got to pay me. But the week of every major championship, I'll come on. And whenever I have something, a book or something like that, I'll come on. And then otherwise, once a month or so. If you just want to call, you can call. And it became one of the most popular recurring segments in Baltimore. I remember famously that we did a poll at one point after Drew and I had split and I had gone to the afternoon show. And the two most popular and listened to segments were John with Drew and then Kevin Van Valkenburg on my show. And I was at an Army-Navy game, and John had literally just done my show like the day before. I think I did the Thursday show from the studio, and then I did the Friday show from Philadelphia at Army-Navy. They did a radio row. And that morning, the guy that was running the radio row was going over who all the guests were going to be that day, because they would actually, unlike the Super Bowl radio row where you just got to grab whoever you can grab, at Army-Navy radio row, they scheduled it all out for you. They did it was incredible. They did all the work. You just showed up. And they were like, hey, well, we can get you John Feinstein. And I just kind of chuckled. I'm like, yeah, we just did 30 minutes yesterday. And then I happened to see John in the room. I guess he maybe was with CBS or somebody or something. I saw him in the room, and I was chuckling. I was like, John, they wanted you to come on with me. You just were on with me yesterday. And he's like, looked at me. He's like, do you not want me to come on the show today, Glenn? I was like, no, by all means, come on over. So we did back-to-back days with John Feinstein. And I remember finishing with him and saying, John, it's sort of like we become it's almost like we've become good friends. And he looked at me, and I swear to God, he said, do you not consider us friends? We've known each other for years. And there was a moment where it struck me what a big deal that was to me. Because I grew up obsessed with, I wanted to be John Feinstein. Because he did everything. He was on every TV show. He was on every radio show. He wrote for the Post. He wrote all these books that I had read. I wanted to be John Feinstein. Maybe not, I wanted to be Johnny Holiday more than anything. That was, if there was one, that's not true. Ironically, I wanted to be Tom Davis. I wanted to be Johnny Holiday. I wanted to be Tom Davis because he got to be on a goofy radio show where he could just be the sports guy, but he still got to be in all the bits, and I loved that. Like when he was on Rouse and Company. And then I wanted to be Johnny Holiday because he got to work for two of my favorite teams. It was almost unfair. He got to do Maryland football and Maryland basketball. How does that work? But I did. I had that reverence that I wanted to be John Feinstein because I would see how ubiquitous he was, how he was. Everyone knew him. Gary Williams knew him. Tiger Woods knew him. Everyone knew John Feinstein. And then John Feinstein was telling me that we were friends. And it blew my mind. And I didn't care about golf the way that obviously Drew did. And so, when we would talk, it wouldn't be about golf. We would talk a lot about Navy. We'd talk a lot about Maryland. He also, wrote that book about the Ravens, where he was embedded. And he would tell me stories about walking across the bridge with downtown Diane, and we would joke about everybody that we knew and had in common in our lives. And he actually then did another book about quarterbacks that was dedicated, a chunk of it, he had 4 quarterbacks that he followed, and one of them was Joe Flacco. And, he would talk to me when he was working on that book and having conversations with Joe. And it was so neat to me that, he just treated me like I was one of the group. I wasn't an idiot that was bothering him for his time. I was a friend. It kind of blew my mind. And boy, could he get me to read books that I otherwise would not give a even the last time we had him on was to talk about that Ivy League football book. And otherwise, I would never pick up an Ivy League football book. But if John Feinstein wrote it, I was going to read the thing. I really liked John. I really did. And I know that a lot of people have talked about him. In D.C., he was larger than life. A lot of people have talked about how John was very strong in his opinions and very quick to tell you were wrong. Even about trivial things. Not even about, political things, because he certainly had very strong political opinions. But even about trivial things that you would just say as a throwaway, he would tell you were wrong. No, you're wrong about that. Like, what do you mean I'm wrong? It doesn't even matter. Nope, you're wrong. He would tell you all the time. We would always joke, always. From the first time I ever had John Feinstein on a show, he had one rule. I don't wait on hold. It's a radio person. It drives me nuts. Like, it drives me nuts when we haven't called a guest during the break to know that they're there when we come back from break. Because then you're dancing a little bit as a radio person. Like, is the guest going to post? Or we?
Which I never did.
Yeah, no, you do it all the time.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy.
Okay, all right.
Drives me insane. Like, we're in a break. Call during the break, so I know. I don't really care all that much. Like, I'm over it. But, like, it inherently, and we do things obviously a little bit different. If we were at the radio station, I would strangle you.
Right.
Like, call during the break. But John had I will be there when you call. And that was part of why this worked. Sometimes the reason why you do that is because you never know if somebody's not going to answer the first time you call, how that's going to work. John would always answer. There was never a problem. Like, John never missed anything he had. If he was scheduled to do it, he was doing it. But he was so efficient with his time that he wasn't giving. There was no, I'll sit through 2 minutes of commercials before I come on the radio station.
So when you book him, you had to tell him like 11:32 or
no, you would if you told him 11:30,
Gotcha.
you called and if you called at 11:32, he'd let you know. Like, being a phone screener with John was amazing. Like, what's going on today? What happened here? He let you know if you were off on the time, like he did. But he had that rule. He would say, I don't wait on hold. And we would joke about it. Like, I remember the first time I had to tell that to Drew. I'm like, hey, by the way, Drew, like, Feinstein's going to come on, but because this is back when we used to take 1,000 calls a morning. And so sometimes we'd come back from a commercial and Drew would be like, let me squeeze one other call in because the lines would be backed up and locked for hours. And I would always have to say to Drew, like, if John's coming on, you cannot, like, he'll hang up. He doesn't wait on hold. And I always wanted to have, like, I wish I could be that cocksure. Like, I talk all the time. I do this regular feature in Kansas City called The Drive on my buddy Seren Petro's show. And I love Seren. And they will call, like, 5 minutes ahead of time because it's this functional radio segment where they want to go from, like, where all the biggest news is. Today we're in Milwaukee, and it's just this old school cool radio segment. It's great. But, like, they'll call that much to know that the next one is lined up, so he knows exactly how much time he has for Cleveland before he's got to go to Baltimore. And every now and then I've wanted to be like, I'll answer the phone. I don't want to wait on hold. Like, I've wanted to do the John Feinstein bit, but I am not John Feinstein. Like, they're not going to let that fly for me. For John, we would do whatever because he was going to kill every time. The ease with which you could realize you had just done a half an hour with John Feinstein. The number of times. And some people, I'm trying to think of some. It's funny, I know Patsos was on with Jeremy this morning. Some people, it was get out of the way. Like, he's just going to go. John had a little bit of that in him, but it was more you were going to be so engaged with the conversation and his stories, and you were going to go back and forth, and then you would just think of something else that you'd be interested in talking about. We'd have John on the week of a major, and then I'd be like, oh, we should talk about Gary Williams. We should talk about the latest Dan Snyder controversy. We should talk about see how he feels at something stupid that Peter Angelos had done. And all of a sudden we'd look up, and he was never mad about how long. Somebody would say John liked the sound of his own voice, and there's probably some truth to that. But, like, I would never get an angry call or text from John, oh, you kept me for 25 minutes today. I told you I only had 15. He was so gracious with his time. Incredibly gracious. And if he had something that he needed to do afterwards, he would tell you. He would say, hey, I can't stay on long today. I'm talking to, and he would say it so casually. He'd be like, I'm talking to Phil Mickelson in 15 minutes. You know, like that. But you would just have so many things. it's an era of radio that doesn't exist anymore where you would just talk about anything because he was just a great guest. He could have a story about anyone and anything that was going on in sports. There was some crazy Terrell Owens story that day. John had a story. Whoever it was, John always had a story about him. Always had something that he could offer. Even in recent years when we were doing this, I mean, casually it would end up being 30 minutes that we were chatting with John. And I would say something like, John, I've kept you way too long. And he would just be like, Glenn, I got time. It's fine. It was so cool to me that John Feinstein, like, I do get tickled when, like, Jim Nantz goes out of his way to tell me he loves me or something. Like, I'm like, wow, it's Jim Nantz. Harlan. Oh, I lose it when it's Harlan. Harlan came on. Rita's obsessed with Harlan. And so we had never had him on that show. And Harlan came on. And she was, I can't believe you're friends with Kevin Harlan. I'm like, I can't believe it either. I have no idea why he puts up with me like this. And guys like that, it does tickle me more so even than like when I tell somebody that I'm friends with an athlete. The Cal Ripken one has been wild to me over my life. That never gets old for me. Like, I grew up obsessed with Cal Ripken, a guy who couldn't go more out of his way for me over the years. Donated to our a Drive for Helping Up mission this year from his own personal collection. Like, just said, I got some stuff lying around. You can have it. Thanks. But John Feinstein was one of the first that, like, it ever, like, gobsmacked me. Like, I'm friends with John Feinstein. Like, he's my friend. He likes me. Like, he likes talking to me. He likes doing this. We know the same people. He was obviously very close with Patrick, as you'd imagine. Patrick Stevens being in D.C. and covering college basketball and college sports. And, like, in a way, I felt like I was part of the circle. Not that I was ever going to, like, go out to, like, a power lunch with him and Kornheiser or something like that. But it made me feel like I was on the ins because I knew John Feinstein. And it was one of the coolest things that I ever experienced was that relationship. And boy, was he a titan, man. He was just a titan in this business. Everyone has read John Feinstein's books. And then you would forget just how good he was at writing columns. Like, you would just think of him as an author, and then he'd write, and you'd be like, oh, God. He's great at that, too. At one point, he was actually a color analyst for Navy football. Famously, he was color analyst for UMBC basketball in recent years. And he and Gary did games together, and including the year they made the run to won the America East and beat Virginia. He was regularly, when Masson would do basketball broadcasts, he would just be the color analyst. And he was good at that. In fact, I remember my buddy Mike Scamponi, whose son now works with us at the radio station, which is a wild, Mike was one of my mentors. I remember Mike saying that to me. Like, he would use, like, Feinstein would do the BB&T Classic. I'm looking forward to talking to Gary about that because my father and I always went to, it was so great to go to the BB&T Classic. You could get cheap upper deck tickets for like $15, and you would get 4 great games over 2 days, and that was the best. But I remember Mike would be like, you could do what John's doing. You don't have to be Charles Barkley to be a color analyst. You know the game, tell stories. And when I first got back into doing play-by-play, I would get calls from people like, hey, could you come do color for us? And I'd be like, I don't know how comfortable I am with being the color. And then I would fall back to that. I would remember what Feinstein would do as a color analyst and how you can – a lot of times when we put non-athletes in color analyst roles, it's that you hear it, they'll they'll just start doing play-by-play. Because it's what they know. Like, we do this now in this business where, like, we just need somebody to sit and be another. There'll be some of that this weekend at the Callum Robinson Mustang Classic, where we just need somebody to sit in on the broadcast, right? Like, you want to have a second person there. But sometimes those people, the color part of it, they're just not as comfortable with. John was what taught me how to do that, and why when I was getting calls in 2014 after the radio station went away to go randomly be the color analyst for Virginia Union football or something like that. I was like, all right, I guess I'll give it. John can do it. Like, not that I had the stories that John Feinstein had. The best, man, the best. Like, just so incredibly good at what he did, and was such a friend to ours. And I know when Drew is in here next week, we'll tell some more stories. And I could not have been any better to us, and all of us. And it wasn't unique to us. Like, it was everyone in this industry. He was a friend to everybody. And, yeah, he had his opinions, and they were strong. But he was also willing to, like, go back and forth with you. He wasn't afraid, and he didn't hate you if you disagreed with him. I know my buddies, the Junkies, had him on every week, and, like, they would get into real spats. But he was okay with that. In fact, he loved it. Great guy. I
didn't have any, obviously, personal stories like you did, but I booked him at least once or twice for here. And one time I think I almost completely botched it because I when I ask people to come on, I'm like, hey, sometimes I'll be like, hey, you got 10 minutes to jump on. Sometimes I'll just say, hey, you got like a few minutes. Like, I don't want to be like, intruding. I know people are busy, and I figure John's pretty busy, and so I think I asked. It was you, like he wasn't plugging anything, and you and Drew were in the next day. And I was like, hey, John, you got a few minutes to jump on with Glenn and Drew? And, like, I don't like he didn't reply right away. And then, like, a couple hours later, I want to say he replied. Or maybe he did reply right away. I'm not sure. But he's like, hey, man, what the heck? A few minutes? No, I can't do a few minutes. If I'm coming on, I want to come on. And I was like, oh, God. John, I'm sorry.
That's the thing with John. It's very funny. You've never told me that. It's very funny that he was offended by the idea that we weren't going to keep him on long enough.
Exactly.
Like, that's everything that I know about John. That's correct. Like, there is no few minutes. I'm John Feinstein. You're making time for him. There would be it's funny you say that, but like I always have to promise. I don't know if Josh is listening today. Whenever Josh will come on, he doesn't want to come on for a minute. He doesn't want to come on it. He wants to be a part of the show, and John was like that. Like, he didn't want to just throw away because what was the point? What is you could do that yourself. You don't need me for that. But if I'm going to be a part of it, let's get into it. Let's have a meaningful conversation, which was what made him so good. So you can have a meaningful conversation about anything. I'm so sad, man. I was so sad. And not because, it's not, like Pete Medhurst was a close personal friend, like somebody who was in my life on an almost daily basis. John wasn't like that, but he was a friend. And went out of his way to let me know he was a friend. And somebody that we could call upon and reach out to, not just for guest segments, but for other things. Man, I love that guy.
I read Next Man Up, that was the Ravens book, in 7th grade. And I think that's like when that I learned so much. Like, that's probably still my favorite book of all time. Like, I've probably read better. I'm sure I've read better books maybe, but like that's probably that book. So much from that book.
His Army Navy book, and I apologize, I can't remember what it was called. Oh God, what was the name of the Army Navy book? Jesus. But his Army Navy book to me is it's one of the most important things. It taught me a lot before I was more intimately involved with Navy.
Civil War, was that?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. So good. It's just so good, man.
Maybe, and it was, in 7th grade, that was when the Ravens won the Super Bowl as well. So, so much, like, kind of, like, overlapped with that. And I just learned so much about, the business of the NFL through that book. And,
we did this a little bit earlier this morning. I'll pull the curtain back because of his schedule today. But it was really kind of the great Gary Williams to take some time to reflect not only on John, but we also talked some hoops, things like that. And we'll play that for you right now here on GCR. Well, as we've been discussing this morning, of course, our friend John Feinstein passed away yesterday, and someone who knew John very well was involved with John's events, and I have no doubt had many fights with John Feinstein over the years as well, is a friend of ours and is certainly one of the greatest coaches in college basketball history. The great Gary Williams is with us this morning here on GCR. Coach, it's Glenn. It's always good to talk to you. I hate that we're doing it like this, but thank you for spending some time with us this morning.
Oh, no problem, Glenn. Excuse me. It is a tough time. I knew John since probably 1978 when I became the basketball coach at American U. And he was always, John had an unbelievable memory. Like he'd interview after a game or whatever, he wouldn't take a lot of notes, and you think, well, I can't wait to see that article tomorrow. But, it was word for word. He nailed it. And that's what he had. He was very intelligent, and I think it showed in his writing because he was so varied in what he could do, whether it was politics, sports, whatever the sport, multi-sports, and just probably the most prolific sports writer in terms of writing books we've seen.
There's no question about that. Coach John was not shy with his opinions. Like, there's no question about that. And
oh no.
And sometimes, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's all right.
Sometimes that can rattle a coach. That can frustrate a coach. But yet, I was always fascinated by your relationship with him. Like, was it just a respect that you had for his profession? Why, despite the fact that you knew inevitably he was going to be saying things negative at times about you, were you so close with him?
Yeah, John didn't let friendship get in the way of saying negative things about myself. But I respected him because he was honest. I don't think he ever deliberately tried to hurt you. He was just reporting what he felt was out there. And, he did a book on the ACC when I was at Maryland, March to Madness. And it was, he had access to each team for 2 practices, and he got to sit right behind the bench for a couple games. And it was an amazing book. It didn't, get the same play as Season on the Brink. But at the same time, he really was able to get into every program in the ACC and really do a good job with it. And, he dealt with the Krzyzewskis. He dealt with everybody. And, everybody respected John for what he did. And, of course, you never won an argument with John. I mean, that wasn't going to happen. You might as well go fishing or something than have an argument with John because he was going to win.
On the flip side, I always felt like there was an enormous amount, despite his willingness to criticize. And it's something that I think I learned from him in my ventures into this business was the respect that he had for you in particular, but for everyone in this profession. That, yes, he was going to be tough on you, but I always sensed that he had an incredible respect for particularly the coaches in this business.
Yeah, I think he had a pretty good feel, and that probably goes back when he was undergraduate at Duke. He wrote for the school paper there when Krzyzewski was getting it going, and he came to the Washington Post directly from Duke as a summer intern, and then they kept him there after the summer. They hired him full time, and of course, they wouldn't give him the Maryland job or the Georgetown job back at that time. So they gave him to American U, where I happened to be coaching, and that's where I got to know him. And he was the same then, and I think that's something to be said in that, the way he was as he got bigger, he didn't get softer. He stayed tough, and I think that's one of the reasons for his success.
Gary Williams is with us this morning here on GCR. Coach, the BB&T Classic is something that obviously I associate you with, and when I was a younger man, my father and I went every year to see all of these major matchups. Can you tell me about, how that came about and John's involvement and why it was so important for you to be involved in that event and what he was doing for Children's Charities Foundation?
Well, I think that was the key. It was a way to raise a great deal of money for children's charities, plus bring really top-flight basketball to the D.C. area. And it was John's idea. The owners of the Washington Post went to John with this idea, and, he ran with it. And he was the guy that did most of the legwork in terms of coaches, because back then that was a commitment. You come in and play 2 games against 2 really good teams. And it was a commitment for us at Maryland, too. But at the same time, it gave us a chance to play on a national stage, early in the season. It was always in December, and it did raise a ton of money for children's charities, which it's one of those things I kind of wish was still around because it did so much good for the local kids.
No, it did so much good for the local kids, and it created so many memories. I mean, I can think still about some of the major wins that you guys had. So when you say that, was John the one organizing, like, who the opponents were?
Yeah, he'd call you and he'd say, "Hey, you got to call a coach from Kansas." And
Okay.
I said, "Well, I don't know the coach from Kansas," but that's how he was. I mean, and you did it, because, John, he was not going to let up until you did it, so you might as well do it right away and not have to put up with all the other stuff. But and coaches, he had that way. He could get somebody to come in from Stanford and play 2 games in D.C. and every once in a while we had to have a return game on that where we had to go back to the place that came in, which I wasn't real happy about. But, it gave us a good strength of schedule anyway.
I still think about the UConn game, right, and the foreshadowing of what was to be in the NCAA tournament.
Oh, yeah.
That year, right? Like,
that UConn game was they were good, and I was worried about having to play them again at the end of the year because they were going to get better because they were a little young when we played them in December. So. And they were good. They were really good. That was our toughest game in the NCAA tournament in 2002.
Greatest basketball game I ever witnessed. I still get sweats thinking about that game. Coach, if I could, we know how important golf is to you. We know how important it was to John. How much did you guys play golf over the years?
John stopped playing as time went on. But he had access to all the players. In fact, he did with Tom Watson, a golf tournament for Tom Watson's caddy, Bruce Edwards, who died of ALS. And every year we do it somewhere, and it was all great courses. But once again, it was John, pushing people to be there, whether it was golf pros, basketball coaches, whatever. John, made sure that you'd consider playing in the tournament, and he always had a great field, and it raised a lot of money for the ALS Foundation.
That's awesome. Coach, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, obviously, we're talking on this Friday at the start of the Big Ten Tournament. I just wonder for you, for how much you care about this program, what this season has meant to you, and seeing the job that Kevin Willard has done, and kind of reestablishing Maryland basketball in a prominent way this season.
Right. I think for me, as basketball has really changed in the last 3-4 years of the NIL and the transfer portal, it meant that Maryland can compete on a national level. And that's what Kevin Willard's done. He's proven in today's game, and he's doing what you have to do to be successful, is to be able to go out and get players, bring them in, put them together. And they play so well together for only having really one player who was a dominant player from last year's team. And they've gone out and they've established themselves, and all of a sudden they're the 2nd seed in the Big Ten tournament, and hopefully will have a very good seed in the NCAA tournament. So I think for Maryland fans, that's the big thing. We can do this. We can handle. There's some schools that are really struggling with the new concepts that are out there and paying players and all that. But I think Maryland has proven that we can go and compete with the top teams in the country.
Can I ask you, you bring up the fact that there's only one, but it's such a special story to me. And I'm not trying to make Juju Reese Walt Williams, because I understand the difference in those two situations. But someone who decided to stick around through coaching changes, through struggles, both from a team standpoint and a personal standpoint, what has Juju Reese's story meant to you in the way that he's come around as a 4-year guy and been so important to this team this season?
Well, he's what every coach wants, is somebody who is loyal to the program, very talented, and keeps working hard. For instance, like his improvement from the free throw line this year is just incredible. Players don't usually improve by that much, especially as they get into their junior year or whatever. And that's what Reese has done. Plus, I think he's the anchor. In other words, the players that are there now playing with him, he's really helped them get into Maryland basketball, get into the university. And that's what you need, I think, in today's game. You need that one guy that's been around, and knows the ups and downs of the league and all those things. Because as a player, you can act tough and all that, but you need that experience. You need somebody that you can lean on, and I think that's what Reese has given the team.
Kevin brought up the idea of him being worthy of having his jersey hang in the rafters, and I know from a sheer talent standpoint or accomplishment standpoint, he certainly isn't at the level of some of those guys that are up there. But for what he meant to the program, and in this era where we don't see this, could you see that as being something he'd be worthy of receiving?
Yes, I could, because your jersey goes up there because you are talented, but you're also because of what you meant to the program, what you meant to the university, and nobody's done a better job on a national basis of hanging in there with the program as went through a coaching change, a very good year his first year, not so good year maybe last year, and then all of a sudden leading the team to a top 15 basketball program this year, and who knows what you can do in the NCAA tournament. So, you stay open because he's done so many good things for Maryland basketball that I'm sure people will consider it.
We're going to have Duane Simpkins join us a little bit later on. You mentioned, obviously, your started American. Seeing him and everything that he meant to you, then going to that place, and I know you were there to support him originally. How special is that story for you that Duane now has them in the NCAA tournament?
Well, it's a great story. Happy for Duane because, he came out of DeMatha, played for us on the team with Keith Booth, Joe Smith, X-Ray Hip, Johnny Rhodes. That was a very young team that got to the Sweet 16. And, Duane was the point guard, and his shot against Georgetown really got us going. He dropped in a little floater in overtime to beat Georgetown, which was our first big national win after I got the job at Maryland. So I'm happy for Duane. I'm happy for American U because they gave me the chance to be a head coach, which is they're not just laying around waiting for you, and they took a chance on a young assistant coach. So I've always appreciated that.
And obviously that was, of course, Joe Smith's coming out party, that game against Georgetown. That was a special day at the old building in Landover. Coach, I just want to tell you a story real quick, and you probably have no memory of this whatsoever, but the night you guys lost to Morgan State, I asked you a question in the press conference, and you got after me a good bit. I don't even remember what the question was, but you got after me, and I understood because it was a tough night. But John was actually the one that once upon a time had told me when I was a young man, never take any of this personally. Never take any of it personally. And so it was John who taught me how to handle myself. And then we saw each other 3 days later, and everything was right back to being fine. And I asked you a question, and everything was – but I learned that lesson from John Feinstein. And I think about it all the time, and I think about you and how much respect and reverence I've had for you in my career and how important it was for me to learn that lesson from John. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you that it wasn't personal. And that obviously it was, these things just happen when we have conversations and we can be men afterwards. And so I appreciate you and I appreciate him, and it just sort of tied all that together for me.
Well, thanks. And, that was John. You could disagree with him, but that never meant that you weren't going to be friends with him because he had his opinion. You're just like yourself. You have your opinion, I have my opinion, and that doesn't mean we don't respect each other or can't get along. And I think it was great back then. I wish there was more debating now on issues. I think that would be a big thing for our country and, for college basketball even, just, to hear everybody's side of the story, not just say, here's my side, and I'm not going to listen to anything else. And that goes on too much today. And, and I think John was the great one with that, where, he could keep his friendships, even though he never would waver on his opinions.
There's no question about it. And it was a great lesson, and it was from you as well, that, just days later, I needed to know that. I needed to know it was okay. Like, I can ask a question. Yeah. We can go back and forth. That's the way it can go. But you've got a job to do, and I did. I appreciate that as a younger man in this business, having that interaction with you. Coach, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. I wish it wasn't reflecting like this on someone that we cared about so much. But thank you for doing this with us this morning. We always appreciate you taking the time for us.
My pleasure, Glenn. Thank you.
That's Gary Williams. And, again, really appreciate him taking the time to remember. And it's a true story, by the way. They had taken their final timeout, and they were down by 3, and I asked him something about calling the timeout when he did and how that changed the final possession. And Gary had at it with me, and it was hilarious because one of the things he said is, I know you. You just don't think I can coach. And it was just so funny because I'm like, Gary. Hello? It's me. But I get it, and I really did. Like, that was one of the things that, like, I would see John go back and forth with these people, and it was always, it can't be personal. It can't be personal, and that taught me a lot in that moment. And 3 days later, Gary and I were just fine, and there was no problem whatsoever. All right, we're going to take a break. Yeah, let's take a break, and then when we come back in, we'll switch up gears a little bit this morning. We'll talk some NFL draft. Kyle Stackpole, our buddy from CBS Sports, has a new mock out. What does he have the Ravens doing, and why? We'll discuss that next on a Friday edition of Glenn Clark Radio.
March is a slam dunk at Live Casino. Catch all the basketball action and more at Sports and Social. Enter our $80,000 Dolce & Gabbana giveaway on March 28th. And catch the Baltimore baseball jersey giveaway March 31st. Take your shot at Live Casino and Hotel Maryland. At Arundel Mills, must be 21. Please play responsibly. For help, visit mdgamblinghelp.org or call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Driving in Maryland? Did you know an Easy Pass from DriveEasyMD.com can save you time and money? Of course you did, because you are a thrifty driver. An antenna reads your Easy Pass transponder and automatically deducts the toll from your Easy Pass account. Learn more at DriveEasyMD.com.
Treat yourself and taste the Baltimore tradition that is the legendary Costas Inn. Hey, it's Stan the Fan Charles. For over 50 years, the Costas Inn has been a Baltimore original, dishing out their amazingly scrumptious, fat, award-winning crab cakes and steamed crabs. Every season is crab season at Costas, so make your plans now by calling 410-477-1975 and reserve your taste of heaven. Sit back, crack some crabs, and watch the Ravens chase down another title on Costas' 15 TVs. On Monday nights, Costas offers their half-pound jumbo lump crab cake with 2 sides for under $30, and there are nightly specials Monday through Friday. So head on down to the Costas Inn at 4100 North Point Boulevard or visit them at costasinn.com.
Gambling can be a fun and entertaining experience, but there are risks involved. If you're planning on betting on the game at the casino or on your phone or computer, know your limit, stay within it. Set a budget and a time to stop. Remember, gambling isn't a financial solution, and it doesn't mix well with alcohol or drugs. Know the risks and have a plan before you begin gambling. For free and confidential services, call 1-800-GAMBLER 24/7 or go to helpmygamblingproblem.org.
COVID-19 and flu viruses are circulating in Maryland. But don't worry, protection is within arm's reach. Protect your health with this year's COVID-19 and flu shots. It's safe and convenient to get them both at the same time. Flex your protection. For more information, visit health.maryland.gov/vaccines.
This message paid for by the Maryland Department of Health.
Coming back in here with Glenn and the other guy, Garrett, whatever his name is. You know who they are.
Stan and Luke have been down in Sarasota this week. It has been an eventful week, but all their coverage, we want to make sure we thank HelpMyGamblingProblem.org, as well as Costas Inn, Easy Pass, and Live Casino and Hotel for making it possible to have Stan and Luke down there in Sarasota this week with the Orioles. It's a Friday edition of GCR. Every week we try to talk a little NFL draft. Obviously, this week got a bit sidetracked by free agency, but now free agency sort of allows you to have that first reflection of, well, how does that impact the draft? Because, for example, when we were having NFL draft segments last week, we were still talking like, hey, maybe the biggest priority for the Ravens is going to have to be tackle. And because they got the deal done with Ronnie Stanley, we know that doesn't need to be their biggest priority. So where do they go now? Let's talk a little bit about that. This man, friend of ours, formerly, as I always remind, he probably gets sick of this part. Like, dude, you don't have to tell people where I interned. It's gone on to much bigger and better things. CBS Sports NFL draft editor and our buddy Kyle Stackpole is back with us here on GCR. Kyle, it's Glenn. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, I don't mind you bringing up the intern thing. It's nice to think back to
but
where it started
a weird thing.
and where we are now.
If I were you, I would be like, yeah, we're over that. Like, I'm a professional. I don't blame you. I just like to give the context for everybody of how proud we are of you and everything that you've accomplished. So I do want to share that.
I appreciate it.
Kyle, I guess let's start with, before we get to the play, because you have a new mock out today at CBSSports.com. Before we get to the specific player, I just want to talk about need when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens. Because I had this strange conversation yesterday where I'll give away that you have it being an edge rusher, and I think my greatest desire for the Ravens roster is for them to find a monster edge rusher. But I do wonder if their bigger need at the moment is in the secondary, where they seem to be a little bit thin, could really use one more cornerback, would really like to have maybe another safety that allows for Kyle Hamilton to be moved around the way they wanted to a year ago but couldn't because the Eddie Jackson thing was so disastrous and Marcus Williams, decided he wasn't a football player anymore. Is the bigger need edge, or is the bigger need in the secondary?
Yeah, so I think ultimately the bigger need is probably in the secondary.
Yeah.
But just kind of based on, so I didn't have any trades in my mock draft, and kind of just how the mock draft set up, the top guys weren't available. So you had Malachi Starks going 17, safety, Nick Emmanwori going 24, and then cornerback-wise, Will Johnson was off the board, Jahdae Barron was off the board. And I feel like those two at each of those positions have kind of separated themselves a little bit. So once those, actually I had Barron going off the board right before the Ravens. So that's kind of a bummer. But so with them off the board, kind of look to edge rusher, and with there was still obviously a lot of talented edge rushers there. And so I decided to go with Donovan Ezeraku. But I agree with you. If any of those four guys that I just mentioned are there, then I would probably say the Ravens should go that route and then come back around on day 2 and grab an edge rusher. But unfortunately, in the mock draft, sometimes it just doesn't play out as you'd like it to. But yeah, no, I would agree with you that secondary, it's just not as strong.
So as a man who plays a lot of time on the mock draft machines, more than I should, given a number of jobs that I have, I get it entirely. Before I get to that pick, Emmanwori is the one that, admittedly, I always find myself with like a crush at some point during draft season. Like, it just works out that way. Anthony Miller ultimately ended up being a Baltimore Raven, but once upon a time that was my guy, or Corey Davis. But Emmanwori is the guy. Like, I'm obsessed. After what he did at the Combine, are we at the point where, like, there's just no way there's a world where he could possibly slip to 27?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm sorry to crush your hopes and dreams, but
you're not the first. You're far from the first, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I had him going a little later. Like, he probably even goes. Well, I had him going up. And actually, I have him 24 to the Vikings. I actually think ultimately he'll probably go higher than that. It's just safety is not really, that people are more worried about corners and more worried about edge rushers. And I mean, based on free agency, they're more worried about interior defensive linemen as well. But I think based on what Kyle Hamilton, and I'm not saying that Emmanwori is going to be Kyle Hamilton because Hamilton is just a beast in his own right, but I think what he's done with Baltimore and coupled with what Emmanwori did at the Combine, teams aren't going to let him slip anymore just because he plays safety, which may not be as prominent of a position of need as you're building your roster as other positions. So unfortunately, I think Emmanwori is probably off the board. Malachi Starks didn't test as well in terms of the 40-yard dash vertical broad, but he was really good in the drills. He's a big-time playmaker. He's from Georgia. He has big-time experience. So I think both those guys are actually going to go probably in the top 20, I would say, unless people get obsessed with, all the edge rushers and all the defensive linemen and the offensive linemen and kind of push them down the board. But it's just there comes a time where we're looking at some teams are basing it off need and some teams are drafting best player available, and you're going to get a team that's drafting best player available that maybe doesn't completely need a safety, but with what he's able to do, they're just going to end up taking.
Yeah, it's too complete an athlete, too talented a football player. Just go figure it out and make it work. All right, so Kyle, let's get to the pick. You end up, as you pointed out, having the Ravens at 27. Go with Boston College edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku. What jumps off the page is 16.5 sacks a year ago, which is insane. I asked, is he that good, or was he that productive?
Yeah, so I think people that they kind of maybe thought he was that productive before the combine. Because, 16.5 sacks, 21 tackles for loss, both top 3 in the FBS. But I think the combine is really where he showcased that not only is he productive, that he has the athleticism and the explosiveness, maybe more so than what people would have initially thought. I know a lot of edge rushers didn't run the 3-cone and the short shuttle, but those are actually really good indicators of success at the next level for edge rushers. And I actually think a lot of edge rushers probably maybe don't do them because they think it might hurt their draft stock. But anyway, so Ezeraku had the best 3-cone time, best short shuttle among edge rushers. He tested really well with the jumps and everything like that. So I think he's one of those guys, that's the benefit of the combine, right? Is you have guys that were really productive and maybe you think they're not as athletic, and then they go out and test
right,
and they have these kind of numbers, and all of a sudden you can match that up with what they're doing on the field. And it also allows room for growth, knowing that, okay, we can mold him even into something bigger. His ceiling's not capped on what he can do with pass rush moves and his technical ability. His athleticism can really be explored and can help the Ravens that way.
It feels like there's almost a little bit of like an anti-Odafe here. Now, as it turns out, Odafe had a really great season a year ago and maybe is sort of putting it all together. But it felt more like when you drafted Owe, you were just drafting an athlete and saying, we'll figure it out, right? Like he's such an athlete that pops, and even though he wasn't productive, we think he can get there. And he certainly had positives even before he finally had a double-digit sack season a year ago. But it feels more like now you're saying this might be more of the just guy that can go win that perhaps the Ravens have been missing all the way back to Terrell Suggs.
Yes, that is basically what I'm saying. That's a great point about Owe, is that he's someone who you know what you're going to get, and it's not like the Ravens can wait, maybe year 3 this prospect ends up becoming like an Odafe Owe. They have 3 guys with Van Noy, Owe, and Ajabo. They're all going to be free agents next year. Van Noy had an incredible season, but he's getting up there in age. So it's like they need to think of an answer both for the short term and for the long term, because they can't have a project come in and once again the pass rush isn't good enough, and all of a sudden they're looking up and they're losing to the Bengals or the Bills or the Chiefs again, and they're trying to figure it out. So I just think he's someone where the Ravens have shown they can draft all different types of players, projects, guys who are really productive, maybe not as athletic, and fit them into their system. And so I think at this point in time, where they are in the draft and how the draft board fell, that would be the best course of action for them.
Kyle, you mentioned the possibility that they could go secondary in round 1 and hold off on edge until round 2. I remember going into draft season, the first few conversations I had with some folks around the league, they were very bullish about the depth of the edge rushers in this group. Now, admittedly, at the time, these were guys that thought that like Mike Green could be falling into the range of where the Ravens are, and even like a Shamar Stewart could be, and you have those guys both in the top 15. Is the depth of the edge rushers so good that you might still be able to find that guy after round 1 that could be quickly assimilating into being an impact player?
Yeah, I really think there is. I just think that, yes, maybe some of those guys that were like late first rounders, like even like Jalen Walker out of Georgia, people weren't looking at him as like a top 10 pick, and then all of a sudden, now he's popping up in the top 10. But there's just so many guys. I think this year as well, like the back half of the first round, you could see a bunch of different edge rushers getting mocked there because they're all in that kind of same range. I think Ezeraku's like a little cut above, which is why I had the Ravens taking him. But you have even guys like Jack Sawyer, Landon Jackson, Jordan Burch from Oregon, Nick Scarrington from Texas A&M.
Yeah.
There's just a bunch of guys on day two, in round two, round three. I just think that so the Ravens, like we kind of going back to the cornerback conversation of if you can get one of those top tier guys in the first round at a different position, go for it. I think then you can ultimately, have your pick of the edge rushers on day round two, round three. It's just how this went out. But I do think that even though there have been guys who, like we're talked about as like depth, like day two guys now that have gone into round one, there's just so many guys. It's clearly the top position in this class, and one of the strongest edge classes we've had in a while.
Kyle Stackpole, CBSSports.com, with us here on GCR. Kyle, the Ravens lose Pat McCary. It's totally possible they're committed to Andrew Voorhees being the guy at left guard, but not just the need at left guard, but to me, obviously, the need for someone that can play multiple positions, given how valuable McCary was to them as being that, like, truly swing. I mean, he could play all five, which is insane. But there is still a part of me that's every time I talk to someone about Gray Zabel, I come away a little bit more fascinated. Does he fit that role of, like, could be your starting left guard, could be the guy that could play multiple positions for you along the offensive line that could replace a Pat McCary?
Yeah, if you had to say, hey, what's one guy that can play that kind of role, I think it would be Gray Zabel. I think the Ravens would have hoped that maybe he didn't have as good as a Senior Bowl, because then he would have been in that range in round two where they could grab someone like him and all this, because he played left tackle primarily at North Dakota State, but then you go to the Senior Bowl and he's playing guard and he's playing center and he's just stonewalling everyone. And now everyone looks at him as a, late first, early second rounder. So I think he would be ideal. If you're saying I need one guy to replace him, it would be him. But there are a couple other guys, Marcus Mabeau, I think that's how you pronounce it, the guard from Purdue. He's kind of got guard tackle flexibility. Wyatt Millian from West Virginia, he's got center guard versatility. So there are a couple of those guys that are going to get taken in that range of the Ravens second round pick that have the versatility to play multiple positions. And it's a good problem to have for Baltimore, because on their board, they'll know exactly who they rank. It's like they'll have a ranking of like who is Patrick McCarry's replacements. Like, let's list them.
Right.
And then, however they fall off the board, let's grab one of them. So I think that's part of the reason, they let him go, in addition to, bring back Stanley. That's a lot of money. But knowing that there are guys that have position versatility, and it kind of just seems like nowadays that offensive linemen almost are becoming like more versatile, knowing that the more positions you can play, the longer you're going to be able to stay in this league. So I feel like I'm seeing more and more guys with, it's just not an OT label or an OG label or a center label. You typically see the, guard center, maybe not as much like the tackle center guard like Zabel, but there are more guys than there have been that can, at least in college, play multiple positions. And I trust the Ravens to find the one that can do that in the NFL.
And then I want to run more by you. It's not round one, obviously, but you mentioned the fact that the edge rushers are all free agents after next year. It's the same story at tight end, and we're all assuming that there's going to be some movement there, whether that's extending Isaiah Likely and acknowledging that you're moving on from Mark Andrews after next year, or just outright trying to trade him between now and the draft. I think the Ravens are in the tight end market every year, right? Like, it's an old Ozzie Newsome adage. You can't have enough tight ends. Outside of round one, what does the tight end market look like in this draft?
Yeah, it's actually really strong. Because, everyone talks about Colston, Loveland, and Warren, and they're definitely going to be first-round picks. But then you have a gap, and then that second tier is really strong with, Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. He's more of like a receiver tight end hybrid, so the Ravens probably won't go after him. But then there's Elijah Arroyo from Miami, Mason Taylor, the son of Jason Taylor from LSU, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. And these guys, not only were they productive, but all of them had really strong combines. And so I think the sweet spot for tight end is on day 2. And you make a great point about, like Lynn Andrews, on paper, it doesn't seem like it's a need, but you always have to be thinking in the future. And if they want to go get someone, hey, maybe of those guys I mentioned, maybe one of them ends up falling to the 3rd round, the 4th round, and then all of a sudden the Ravens are getting a steal. So I think I didn't really even think about that scenario on day 2 for the Ravens, but I do think it makes sense, and I think it's something where if that happens, Ravens fans shouldn't be surprised, and they should be happy with that instead of being, oh, we already have 2 tight ends in the roster, why do we need a 3rd? No, here's, Mark Andrews is on his way out, and also this is the class to get a guy. They can basically have their pick of, okay, these are the guys that are left. We really like 2 or 3 of these. Let's go grab them now and help ourselves out for the future, instead of maybe, you have a more pertinent need with not as good of a player.
He is Kyle Stackpole. It's Kyle F. Stackpole on Twitter. That's how you can follow him. And, of course, we have linked up his most recent mock draft on our Twitter account at Glenn Clark Radio. You can go to cbssports.com to find it right there. Kyle, what else can we plug for you guys?
Yes, so we got a bunch going on at CBS Sports. We just started some really in-depth prospect profiles, starting with the quarterbacks, obviously. So you can check that out at CBS. But we have mock drafts coming at you, it seems like 4 or 5 times a week, prospect rankings, scouting reports. So we're up to like 400 prospect rankings and 150 scouting reports. So if you want info on any of these guys as you're preparing for the draft as a Ravens fan, CBS Sports is a place to go.
Great stuff, man. Kyle, always appreciate you, dude. Thank you for taking the time for us this morning. Let's talk again real soon, all right?
Of course. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Kyle Stackpole with us here on GCR. I know there's been some Twitter rumblings that perhaps the things could be progressing with the idea of a Mark Andrews trade that's been percolating. I'm not going to react to that anymore, so then I think we all know that was a possibility, and if it were to happen, we can't be all that surprised by it. A lot of people mentioning the Ravens did convert a lot of Marlon Humphrey's contract, and were able to clear a lot of cap space by doing that. So what could that be for? Well, some of that is just for, as we talked about with Brian McFarland at the start of the offseason, walking around money. Like, some of that's just for functionality, signing draft picks. They just need cap space. And they didn't have a ton of it going into the offseason. They'd still probably like to get something done with Lamar Jackson, but that's a little bit more complicated without him having an agent. There's not, at this point, really anything out there that's particularly worth spending money on. If what you're getting your hopes up for is that, they're clearing money so they can go get Cooper Kupp, I would be floored. They got their wide receiver. I mean, they got 2 because they brought back Tylan Wallace. I just don't see that being even in the realm of a possibility. But I guess you never know. It's interesting in Kyle's mock draft. He has the Steelers getting bailed out.
Yeah.
I don't even care how you feel about Shedeur Sanders. It would be bat-essery for Shedeur Sanders to fall to 21. It would be just the utter nonsense of the number of teams that don't have quarterback answers just being like, nah, we're good. Nah. We don't need it. If the Cleveland Browns really genuinely believe that the better strategy at quarterback is to go Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett.
Couple of Super Bowl champions, yeah.
Thank you. I don't have the words for how bad teams stay bad. The Tennessee Titans trade out of the first pick, give it to the Giants, and then just give it another shot with Will Levis. This is the Scott Van Pelt thing. What are we doing? How are you allowed to run these organizations if these are the thought processes that you have? You You're a quarterback. It ain't hard. Holy crap. We just make this so... It's insane that the Raiders are doing the bit with Geno Smith. Like, with all respect, trade for Geno Smith and then draft a quarterback that might be the answer. Because you don't have the answer. We're so terrified of, like, offending these veteran quarterbacks. Except for Joe Flacco for some reason. Everybody was okay with offending Joe. We're not allowed to offend Geno Smith. Well, we've got to be committed to Geno. Why? And I know Geno Smith isn't trash. But you know what caliber of quarterback you need to win a Super Bowl. Oh, it's a weird league. Championship weekend, high school hoops down in College Park. Go to countysports.zone. Get every update, every score, everything you know about all the title matchups all weekend long. Countysports.zone, proudly sponsored by your local Toyota dealer and buyatoyota.com. When we come back in, we are going to chat with Duane Simpkins, Maryland legend, now headed to the NCAA tournament for the first time as a head coach at American. That's next. It's a Friday edition of Glenn Clark Radio.
Driving in Maryland? Did you know an easy pass from driveeasymd.com can save you time and money? Of course you did, because you are a thrifty driver. An antenna reads your EasyPass transponder and automatically deducts the toll from your EasyPass account. There, you just saved money with EasyPass, all without slowing or receiving a notice in the mail. Well done, thrifty driver, well done. Get your EasyPass at driveeasymd.com.
Treat yourself and taste the Baltimore tradition that is the legendary Costas Inn. Hey, it's Stan the Fan Charles. For over 50 years, the Costas Inn has been a Baltimore original, dishing out their amazingly scrumptious, fat, award-winning crab cakes and steamed crabs. Every season is crab season at Costas, so make your plans now by calling 410-477-1975 and reserve your taste of heaven. Sit back, crack some crabs, and watch the Ravens chase down another title on Costas' 15 TVs. On Monday nights, Costas offers their half-pound jumbo lump crab cake with 2 sides for under $30, and there are nightly specials Monday through Friday. So head on down to the Costas Inn at 4100 North Point Boulevard or visit them at costasinn.com.
Make the most out of every day in your Toyota RAV4. Available in hybrid or gas-only models. A RAV4 can get you where you want to go in style. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals on new RAV4s from your local Toyota dealer today.
The latest edition of Press Box is available now. On the cover, Glenn Clark and I sit down for a Q&A with Orioles owner David Rubenstein, discussing what he learned from his first year as owner, his goals both on and off the field, and his involvement in baseball decisions. Also inside, Brooks DeBose profiles new Oriole Tyler O'Neill, and we meet college lacrosse players from around the state. Press Box is available for free at over 500 locations throughout the region, including 60 Royal Farm stores. Or you can read the entire issue online at PressBoxOnline.com, where you can also find great betting advice and the best daily coverage of the O's, Ravens, and Terps.
Need a trophy or award that's as unique as the achievement? Look no further than Crown Trophy. With locations in Owings Mills and Gaithersburg, they specialize in custom trophies, plaques, and medals for any occasion. From sports and academic awards to employee recognition and corporate gifts, visit crowntrophy.com today and let them help you create a lasting memory for your school, team, or business. Crown Trophy is a proud supporter of the Maryland Public Secondary Schools Athletic Association. crowntrophy.com.
One of the things that's definitely wrong with this country is that this dude still has a job somehow, some way. Glenn Clark.
All right, back in here on GCR as we continue along here on a Friday edition of the program. Well, Gary was on with us earlier and wanted to make sure that we said hello to and congratulations to our next guest from him. As what a cool story. This guy, one of my favorites, legendary former Maryland basketball player, and had to grind away in his coaching career to get the opportunity just to be a head coach, and now he is headed to the NCAA tournament as American, won the Patriot League this week. He is Duane Simpkins, and he is with us this morning here on GCR. Coach, it's Glenn. It's always good to chat with you. Thank you for taking the time for us, and congratulations, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Thanks so much for the kind words. Yeah, it's been a journey, but it's been ordained, man, by the man above. So I'm right where I'm supposed to be at the right time.
Coach, did you know, like, when you arrived at American, like, that given your connections to the area, I remember us talking about the job. We were even, like, joking about the idea of having, like, a swap between you and the big programs when it came to players. And it was a fun – did you know how quickly that you could make this work when you got there?
Yes and no. I thought that the core group of guys that we had that were then juniors and seniors, I felt that we had enough. If we had another year together, I thought that from a talent perspective, we would be in the mix. And then when you incorporated us being together for a year with some more experience, I thought that we were going to have a really good shot this year.
You guys had a couple of tough losses down the stretch in Patriot League play that led to you falling out of, like, having that number one spot to yourself. What did that do for this group? Did they need that going into the Patriot League tournament as kind of like a little bit of a wake up?
Yes and no. I mean, I thought we had some tough breaks. We lost at Bucknell, and we had a flu bug that hit our team and hit us hard. Had me calling the Patriot League office to see, could we reschedule the game because we were down bodies. We had 6 or 7 guys, I think, that were able to play. Matt Rogers, our most productive player, was a game time decision. We had to get his fever down from whatever it was to 101, whatever it was. They finally got it down 30 minutes before the game. And credit to the kid, man, he gutted it out. And then the following week, we played Navy, and I was the game time decision. Not a lot of people know, but I missed the day before for practice. I never missed practice. I was crushed. I just couldn't do it. And then the next day during the game, I just sucked it up. And I probably should, in hindsight, just gave it to my staff, man, because I wasn't all the way there. Matt Rogers picked up his 3rd foul in that game, and I was oblivious to it. Normally I'm right on that stuff. I probably would have pulled him, and he fouls out that game, and we lose to Navy by 8. So there were a lot of things, man, but I think it worked out perfectly because, like you said, it was exactly what our team needed from a wake-up standpoint, and it really helped us get centered.
You mentioned Matt Rogers, and it's not just, his talent, obviously, but I think his passion, and we saw that, obviously on display in the title game, and he got the tech early, but how much has he meant to you in taking this job and trying to establish what you wanted to establish at American, and to this team being able to do this? How important has Matt been, just both on the court and that clear passion that he has for this?
Yeah, he's been really important. I mean, obviously, man, I think he's Patriot League Player of the Year. He didn't get the vote for it, and that's another story for another day. But I knew Matt was talented. Credit to Eddie Jackson, man, who was on the former staff who recruited him. I knew coming into it that we had something with him. His ability to shoot the basketball, I thought, was really good. I don't think that it was utilized from the previous regime, and we made that a focal point of our offense. Anytime you have a big that can stretch the court, you gotta make the adjustments. And I implored him to get the shots up. We needed him to shoot at least 5 threes per game. I thought that he was going to shoot at a pretty good clip, and now he's shooting over 40%. And it just makes everybody else's job easier. It spreads the court, gives driving angles for our guards. And he's made me a really good coach, right? Anytime you have good players that make good coaches, and I thought that as a team and as a staff, we utilized him really, really well.
Duane Simpkins, American, headed to the NCAA tournament. He's with us here on GCR. Coach, with that said, it's funny because I was talking to Gary earlier this morning. Like, certainly you came from a place where passion was evident. Do you appreciate that in a player when someone like? I know you don't want them to get texts. Like, I realize that. But, like, is there a different rule maybe for a guy like that? Like, what it does for your team, that you're going to be okay and you'll live with some of that because you want them to play with that type of passion?
Yeah, Matt's one of the most frustrating, talented players that I've ever coached. Okay. Because, like you say, he has that passion. You want him to have that passion, but it has to be grounded. It has to be disciplined at the same time. And I felt that he cost us some things in year one by losing his composure. It was not nearly as consistent this year. I thought he was much better. but he wants to win so bad. He wants to put so many things on his shoulders. It pops his head up, like you said, that tech. I hated that tech the other day, but so like you said, you got to live with it a little bit, man. But the good thing about Matt too, I'm able to chew his ass out during film sessions and in practice when I see that he's crossing the line, and I don't get pushback from him. It was at first last year. This year it's like, I got you, coach. My bad. And now, more importantly, his teammates are able to coach him and help guide him through those things. And that's when I knew we had a championship level team. I tell those guys all the time, a player-led program wins championships and a coach-led program wins games. And they were much better with that in terms of policing themselves.
Boy, that sounds an awful lot like a Gary Williams type of relationship, doesn't it? Like, it really does.
I'm pretty sure Gary had the same relationship with Gravis.
Right?
Gravis Vasquez had tremendous passion, and I'm pretty sure those guys butted heads quite a bit.
No, and famously, Juan would talk about it. Juan would be like, yeah, he cussed me out. I'd cuss him right back out.
And it's crazy. Gary loved that stuff. I think Gary kind of got off on that type of thing. Johnny Rose is like that for my team. Johnny
Really?
could say things to him that I damn sure couldn't say to Gary.
Man, if it works, it works, right? Like,
yeah.
How much of that?
That's what makes a good coach.
And Duane, I wonder from you in your coming through, obviously as a player into a coach, like understanding that not every relationship, not every player is going to be the exact same way. That certain things work with certain guys. Is that almost something that you have to get to? I feel like a lot of coaches want to be rigid, and this is the way that I do things. How important is it to figure that out? Like, hey, with this guy, this is going to work, and it's not going to work the same way with this guy.
It's everything, man. You can't coach and communicate with every player the exact same way. I think good coaches realize that, and they're able to strategize. And more importantly, I think for me, man, I was able to communicate to the rest of the team how I was going to coach Matt and what Matt was going to be able to, quote unquote, get away with that some other guys, that's not you. We can't do those things with you. So I established that pretty early when I knew that we can help change Matt a little bit, but at his core, he's still going to be who he is. And we got to value that without having to cost us any games.
Well, what does this mean to you, right? Like I mentioned your journey to this point, right? And probably knowing what you're capable of, you should have had this opportunity a long time ago. But to get the opportunity and to deliver what you clearly the goal, like this is it for a program like American, you got to do this. That's how you're measured by it. What does it mean to you to prove this is what I'm capable of as a head coach?
It means a lot, man. I don't take it personally, quite honestly. I know that I made some decisions early in my career as it relates to, my relationships and connections with AAU programs and everything. I very well could have early on, got on with Team Takeover or at the time DC Assault, but I felt that in the long term, that was going to stymie hamper my ability to recruit across the board, Takeover, DC Premier, Team Mello. I didn't want to necessarily be aligned with one particular organization. It probably would have sped up my process. I probably would have been a high major assistant coach sooner and everything, but I really felt for the long term that this was going to be the best thing for me. And then just knowing, man, like I've got a tremendous faith in God that like I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be at the proper time. And not a lot of people know this too, like Coach Turgeon, who, I tried to get the job as an assistant coach at Maryland 3 different times, and I struck out every single time. But Turgeon and I swallowed my pride this summer because I realized that our defense needed to be much, much better. And I just reached out to different coaches that I knew were very good defensive coaches. And lo and behold, Turgeon's like, hey, man, like, I'm not doing anything. I would love to be a consultant for you. Wow. And he's been a consultant for us all year. He's come to practice. He sat in on staff meetings. He sat in on film watching by a team. And he's come to numerous games. If he's not there, he watches the games on film, and post game, whether it be that night or the next morning, like he's got a little small report for me on things he thought we did well, things we need to improve on, and make certain suggestions on. You might want to look at playing some zone here. Hey, you probably should have called a time out there. So I value that. And my wife, she thought I was crazy at the time because she was pissed I never got the job.
Yeah,
and she was, but man, you got to put that aside. If you want to try to win ball games, you want to try to get information from as many quality coaches as you possibly can. So, shout out to Coach Turgeon on that.
Man, that's a really cool story, Duane. And maybe what a lesson for a lot of people that goes beyond just basketball, right? That like you don't just shut somebody off and say, you never know how that person might end up being impactful for you. That's incredible, man.
Yeah, and it's funny. We touched on it early on when we started working together, and one of the things he told me, he said, man, I'll be honest with you, Cynthia, I didn't think I was going to be around that third time. He said, I knew something probably wasn't going to go well, and I didn't think it was right for you and your family. And he said, hey, and I believe it. He said, Simp, because of that, you are where you are right now. So let's not even think about it. And I was like, 100% correct.
Man, that's a cool story. I'm really glad you shared that with us. That's such a cool story. I was going to point out just how far away this is from like going 1-31 in your first year working at the college level. Like this is a long way away from that.
That season, man. And I'll say this as a quick tangent, man. Like those people who support Towson University and their men's basketball program, you are out of your mind if you think that you're going to find something better than Pat Scurry. Don't forget, just some years ago, this guy took a job in his first year. They went 1-30 or 1-31 or whatever. Like, you come a long way from that. So be careful what you wish for.
I'm with you on that, and I try to remind people of that all the time, like just how much has changed with that program. But it's incredible to see it happen for you. So now, like, have you allowed have you thought even a little bit about, because we always know the NCAA folks. Every now and then you see like matchups come out and you're like, oh, you were kind of, have you thought at all that like maybe they just might try to have some fun and make it Maryland in round one for you?
I haven't even thought about that. The only thing I thought about, there are a couple of teams, man, when I was at George Mason, we played Auburn at Auburn.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't ever want to be a part of it, be on the other end of that. I mean, just the athleticism. They play hard as hell. They're well coached. They're long, athletic. I was like, that would be a bad matchup. And then when I was at George Mason with Dave Paulson, I think it was year one or year two, we played Houston. And this was before Houston really got it going. Yeah. And man, how hard they play in their rebounding, offensive rebounding. I was like, those are two teams. I'm like,
maybe
I want to see either one of those guys in year one in the first round, but I haven't thought about anybody else, quite honestly.
I know how much, like, you want to celebrate this clearly, but like, what's the line between celebrating the accomplishment versus, we don't intend for this to be it? Like, how do you have those conversations with a group of guys in the aftermath of what's such an incredible moment?
I planted that seed with our guys going into after we beat Colgate in the semifinals, and everybody was saying one more. And I was caught up in saying the same thing. I mean, it was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was late that night. And I was like, nah, the thought should be at least one more. Like, the idea is that we win the next game, but let's say at least one. That implies that, hey, we're going to get this one. And then now, like, let's look towards the next one. And, I talked to our guys about that going into the championship game, and they were like, that's how we should look at this thing. So now that we're here, let's not just be happy with being in it. Like, let's continue to try to win ball games.
I love that, man. I love it. Duane, I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for everybody. I know you work with my friend Karen Angel. Love her. She's awesome.
She's been putting me to work, man. I'm on Zooms and phone calls day and night now. It's cool.
But these are the phone calls that you've been dying to have over the years.
No doubt.
Right? Like,
no doubt.
Everybody's celebrating. Everybody's happy right now. Like, this is what you live for in this business.
Yeah, I had to correct some of my players because, we had a media day for the past couple of weeks on a certain day, and we had to push practice back about another 30 minutes. And this most recent one, the guy's like, oh, man, coach, we just trying to practice. I was like, hey, shut up. Like, nobody was coming to interview you guys 2 weeks ago. So, like, enjoy this.
No doubt, man. Duane, seriously, incredibly happy for you and the job that you have done with that program. Looking forward to seeing you in the NCAA tournament. Thank you for taking the time for us this morning, man. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for pulling for us, man. I appreciate it, guys.
Duane Simpkins with us here on GCR. Obviously a heck of a player during his own career at Maryland, and someone I did not know at all. Did they talk about that on the broadcast at all? Did I miss that on Wednesday? I don't remember hearing.
I did not remember hearing that either.
I don't know. That is wild, man. Like, especially given like the personal nature of it. that he wanted those jobs and didn't get them. And yet, when he needed somebody, and he said, I had to swallow my pride. I had to say, this guy can help us. And that's a great story. I'm sure it'll be one that'll kind of make some Maryland fans' heads explode. But it is. It's a really great story about how Mark Turgeon went back to help Duane Simpkins and get him to this place. So I sometimes you learn things. Like, we have these conversations, and sometimes you're like, I'll just ask the questions. I know what the answers are going to be. That one was not one of those. I was very caught off guard by that, but appreciated a great deal. I know my father's very excited. My father's an American University alum, so a good day for the Fighting Tom Clarks. They're very fighting Tom Clarks. It's an incredible time. All right, when we come back in, we'll talk some Ravens. Jonas Schaffer is going to join us, and then we'll get into the week and the rest of baseball. That's all on the way on a Friday edition of Glenn Clark Radio.
COVID-19 and flu viruses are circulating in Maryland. But don't worry, protection is within arm's reach. Protect your health with this year's COVID-19 and flu shots. It's safe and convenient to get them both at the same time. Flex your protection. For more information, visit health.maryland.gov/vaccines.
This message paid for by the Maryland Department of Health.
Whether your focus is luxury and comfort, convenience and technologically advanced connectivity, or sporty performance and aggressive styling, we've got the perfect Highlander for you. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals on new Highlanders from your local Toyota dealer today.
March is a slam dunk at Live Casino. Catch all the basketball action and more at Sports and Social. Enter our $80,000 Dolce & Gabbana giveaway on March 28th. And catch the Baltimore baseball jersey giveaway March 31st. Take your shot at Live Casino and Hotel Maryland. At Arundel Mills, must be 21. Please play responsibly. For help, visit mdgamblinghelp.org or call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Gambling can be a fun and entertaining experience, but there are risks involved. If you're planning on betting on the game at the casino or on your phone or computer, know your limit, stay within it. Set a budget and a time to stop. Remember, gambling isn't a financial solution, and it doesn't mix well with alcohol or drugs. Know the risks and have a plan before you begin gambling. For free and confidential services, call 1-800-GAMBLER 24/7 or go to helpmygamblingproblem.org.
The latest edition of Press Box is available now. On the cover, Glenn Clark and I sit down for a Q&A with Orioles owner David Rubenstein, discussing what he learned from his first year as owner, his goals both on and off the field, and his involvement in baseball decisions. Also inside, Brooks DeBose profiles new Oriole Tyler O'Neill, and we meet college lacrosse players from around the state. Press Box is available for free at over 500 locations throughout the region, including 60 Royal Farms stores. Or you can read the entire issue online at PressBoxOnline.com, where you can also find great betting advice and the best daily coverage of the O's, Ravens, and Terps.
Contrary to what some people believe, I actually like this guy when he sleeps. Glenn Clark, talking sports.
All right, back in here on GCR as continue along on a Friday edition of the program. A couple of things. One, yes, I have thought about, Brian Powell, the fact that Pete and John are probably having some conversations today. And two people that care deeply, obviously, about Navy athletics. So a sad time for everybody in the Navy community over the course of the last couple of months is two people that were as good as anyone about telling Navy athletics stories over the last few decades. And both Pete Medhurst and John Feinstein are now gone. Dan had a good one from John Feinstein. Dan said, one of the things that I would always love is that Drew would feel like he knew everything about golf, and then he would pose a question to John, and John would unravel his knowledge really quickly because John knew more. Yeah, I mean, or at least he thought he knew more. I'm not probably the right one to be the judge of that, of who was actually right and who was actually wrong in those situations, because Lord knows I don't know enough about golf to be able to do that, but And I here's what I would tell you is that despite the fact that I didn't really care about golf, I cared more about golf in those years, in part because Tiger Woods was still relevant. I definitely, the most I've ever cared about golf in my life was the years where Tiger Woods mattered. So from 97 to 2009, unquestionably was the time that I had the most interest in golf because I was interested in Tiger Woods. But then combine that with, being around Drew and John as they would talk about golf and like tell stories. It did add to the modicum of interest that I had in golf, just being around those guys. So yeah, no doubt about it. All right, we continue along here on a Friday edition of the program. Nothing new as far as the Ravens are concerned. There's going to be a press conference today to introduce DeAndre Hopkins at I think they moved it up to 12:30, so he's probably going to yell at us when he comes on because he's got to get there. They moved that up. But let's talk a little bit more about the week that has been for the Baltimore Ravens. Joining us now, he of course covers the Ravens for the Baltimore Banner. He is our buddy Jonas Schaffer, and he's back with us once again on GCR. What's going on, pal? How are you?
Morning, Glenn. How's it going, man?
Everything's all right. Illinois scored like 100 points last night. You nervous going into tonight?
I think there could not be a bigger difference in terms of quality of defense than Iowa's and Maryland's right now.
That is true. That part is 100% true. I also kind of don't. I don't know if this could sound. I almost don't care about this weekend. Like I don't. Like if they were to somehow lose to Illinois tonight, it's a bummer. But I kind of don't care, right? Like I don't think they can win the Big Ten tournament because I do think this is the one place where the depth kind of catches up to them. It would be fun as hell if they did, but I kind of don't care about this weekend all that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're an optimistic Maryland fan, you're talking to yourself into the possibility that they could get moved off that they could definitely stay off the 5 line.
Right.
I think you're always a little bit trepidatious if you see that 5-12 matchup pop up. And then, if they win a couple and they had some favorable results yesterday, like Iowa State lost, Texas A&M lost. So I think there's not remote, but there is a chance that if they, get a couple wins in Indy this week, that they could move up to the 3 line. And then for as much as Maryland fans might have been looking forward to a 1-4 Maryland versus Duke matchup, I think the smart thing to do is to do everything you can to avoid the 1 seed in the tournament for as long as possible.
You're probably right about that. You're probably right. All right, let's get into the stuff people care about. Let's do that. I can't imagine there being a negative opinion towards DeAndre. I feel like what's happened is the history of the Ravens not having any wide receivers and then going out and getting wide receivers and moving towards the tail end of their career has poisoned the discourse about when they do something like this. This, to me, makes all of the sense in the world for the Ravens roster as constructed, not because I think DeAndre Hopkins can still be, DeAndre Hopkins, but because I think he can be what it is that they need behind their top 2 wide receivers.
Yeah, I think he gives you everything that you're looking for from a guy at that price point. He's going to be the adult in the room, which I think that group needs. Not that there's rampant immaturity concerns with Rashad and with Zay, but I think they learned a lot from being under the wing of Odell a couple of years ago. And I think Diop is a guy who has been through the wars and knows how to get open. And if he can be the guy who gives you a couple of catches a game, is a red zone weapon, is durable, which is something that he's been throughout his entire career, then to pay $5-6 million for 1 year for that guy, help him be a bridge dude. Maybe he's the difference between you winning only a couple playoff games and getting into the Super Bowl. Then I think that's absolutely a smart piece of business.
And that's where I'm at. Like I just can't imagine. And then they bring back Tylan Wallace as well. I'm not trying to say that like they've got a great wide receiver room, but it very much looks like among the best in Ravens history at the moment to me.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking 2 years ago, I think, about that room being the best in Ravens history, and it didn't quite live up to those expectations because Bateman wasn't healthy and Zay was finding his way, and Odell, just was kind of producing in fits and starts. But I mean, listen, last year they had a Pro Bowl receiver, which is First time they've ever done that. Rashad Bateman, I think they're justifiably so. There are some Ravens fans out there who feel like he's even better than Zay Flowers is. And now you bring in, potentially ascendant Devontae Walker. We all saw what Tylan Wallace could do, not just in the regular season, but in the preseason last year as well, where he was pretty close to dominant. And, bring in D-Hop to be the guy who is maybe the dirty work guy. I still wonder who's going to be like of the top three, which of those three guys do you rely on the most to be the strong man blocker? Because I think that's something that Nelson Aguilar did a really good job at. You think of all the pitch plays that Derrick Henry ran wild on last year. Nelson Aguilar was the guy, digging out the safety or digging out the linebacker. And I don't think D-Hop has the best reputation as a blocker, but, if they just need him to do it once or twice a game for some of those big runs, then that's going to help. So I feel great about where this wide receiver core is, and, you should feel great about it for next year as well.
There have been a couple of people in my sphere who have wondered if the Ravens prioritizing wide receiver, making it the first thing they did, I guess Ronnie Stanley was the first thing that they did, but then the next thing that they did might make us read any more into the idea that they think that perhaps one of their other top pass catchers might be gone. Do you buy anything into the idea that there is some relationship between the acquisition of DeAndre Hopkins and the future of Mark Andrews?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard not to read into it. They're paying Mark Andrews a lot of money right now, and they don't really have a huge need for him to be a guy with how this roster is currently constructed, to be a guy who plays 60, 70%, 80% of the snaps, which for so long was the expectation for Mark Andrews. You've got tight ends who do so many different things, and we know how Todd Monken looks to kind of toggle between these personnel groups and these different offensive styles. And if you're paying Mark Andrews to have an $18 million cap hit, you want the most bang for your buck. And you could argue that him only playing 40 to 50% of the snaps, one, isn't going to get you the biggest compensatory pick possible if you are going to write out this contract. And two, wouldn't be as wise an investment as whoever would be taking those spots and maybe playing in excess of whatever snaps Mark Andrews is going to get next year. So I would love to see Mark hang around in Baltimore. Obviously, we'll know by Monday if he is indeed hanging around in Baltimore because of when that bonus is due. Yep. But it was definitely not hard to connect the dots and think how much does this guy who's going to be the wide receiver 3 overlap with the skill set of a guy who Mark is effectively a slot receiver at this point, and you just wonder, how much overlap there needs to be at that position right now.
He is Jonas Schaffer, the Baltimore Banner. He's with us here on GCR. And I agree with everything you just said, Jonas. I guess the only question I would have back is, but what is there to spend the money on at this point, right? Like if you're saving the money, it's to do what? It feels like a week ago that makes a ton of sense. I think we're already at the point of free agency where you're like, well, you got the money from restructuring Marlon Humphrey. But what is left that you really feel like it's worth putting money to at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple intriguing cornerbacks who I think might be useful. I mean, obviously, like half of a Ravens world, it feels like, is in love with the idea of Lamar reunited with Jair Alexander. That is precisely the type of guy who would have infuriated Ravens fans if he were on the roster.
Oh, no question.
And not playing. And racking up a huge bill in terms of salary cap hit. You could see them being interested in a guy like Rasul Douglas, who fits the kind of physical prototype that they like to have at that position. And then there's just the idea of them, even if they don't spend all that money, just holding on to it and having that be the kind of rainy day fund that they are inevitably going to need for the season. So and there's always the possibility that there is some not quite premium level free agent who comes available after the draft. There's always going to be that third or fourth or fifth wave of guys who, when teams decide that they just don't have a need for him, or they have a guy who's waiting in the wings from the draft to replace someone and they don't want to pay their $5, $8, $11 million salary, we'll release them, and that's where the Ravens going to do their best business, because those guys are not going to count against the Ravens in the top pick formula.
Jonas, my kind of working theory at the moment is that the three biggest areas of need at this point would be as you point out, secondary, both cornerback and arguably, another safety that can allow that flexibility for Kyle Hamilton. Right. High-end edge rush, but I don't think that guy's available now in free agency. I think that's kind of like draft only at this point. And then I still think that even if they're committed to Andrew Voorhees being Patrick McCary's replacement, I think there's enough of a question to that, whether they are or they're not. Even if they were, I still think they could use a veteran swing offensive lineman, someone who could play multiple positions.
Yeah, I agree with that. And actually, just to circle back for a second, I do wonder maybe if, like, you go into the season with that $11 million safe on the Mark Andrews thing, knowing or hoping it's like a pass rusher, a premium pass rusher who's in the final year of his deal, but on a bad team, that's something that you can acquire at the deadline for whatever it's going to take because you don't love Kyle Van Noy, you don't love Adolphe Aowe, and you still need a little bit more juice. So that's something. But yeah, I think offensive line has to be a priority. I think that's why some of the guys who have been linked to the Ravens in the first round could be definitely useful. Like the Ohio State guys, they can play guard, they can play tackle. That they're not going to be quite as versatile as Patrick McCary, but then again, who is?
Right.
I think you absolutely need to find at least one guy who could do a lot of good stuff. There's plenty of, young, athletic linemen who might be available on day two who, if they hadn't re-signed Ronnie Stanley, I would not be trusting to step into that left tackle or right tackle position. But if you take them in day two or early day three, then you give them the chance to develop, and maybe they're just good enough to buy you 100 snaps here or 200 snaps there in a season, and that's what helps you. That's what helps kind of tide you over.
And as much as I do think they're going to draft those guys, I still really feel like one of them needs to be a veteran because you need to almost have a not just for Voorhees, but like a backup plan in general because somebody's going to get hurt between now. Like there needs to be someone that you can count on that can start week one for you as necessary, and that's why it feels like it needs to be a veteran to me.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about the free agent market right now in terms of who might be out there.
It's so funny you say that. We play that game on the show where we look over the list and literally we only know the guys that used to be in Baltimore. That's it. We can't tell you anything about these other guys. We're like, oh, hey, Tristan Cologne's available, and we're like, we can only respond to it because we know him. That's the only way we can talk about it.
Or if he's on your fantasy team.
Correct. Well, and believe it or not, we don't have a ton of. We actually don't do. Our friend Patrick Stevens does fantasy punting, but I've never done fantasy O-line. Last one for you. Just as far as inside linebacker is concerned, and I know they did bring in Jake Hummel, but do we read into this that they're trying to say, hey, we do have faith in Trenton Simpson? It's not that we think that that's a mess. It just went a different way last year. Do we buy into the idea that they are committed to Trenton Simpson based on allowing Chris Board and Malik Harrison to walk?
Yeah, I think they kind of have to be at this point. Obviously, if there is a really good linebacker who falls to them, probably not in the first round, but in the second round, and there's a possibility of even the first round. Jahad Campbell, I believe, is the Alabama linebacker who everyone seems to love, and everyone has kind of branded as someone who plays like a Raven.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's going to make it out of the top 20, top 25, but, maybe he has a weird ball like Kyle Hamilton for whatever reason, and the Ravens are sitting there and they have no one else they like on their board more than him. Then, maybe you just kind of, wipe your hands and say, well, we're just going to make Trenton Simpson a really, really good special teams player, and maybe he, helps out on occasion on the edge or something because he is pretty jacked up, and he can maybe set the edge in a way that Malik Harrison did for you last year as that kind of versatile chess piece. So, but with them, making the change that linebackers coach the way that they did, with them bringing in Chuck Pagano, who's hopefully going to bring a little order and harmony to that secondary, which is obviously lacking over the first half of the last season. You just hope that Trenton could be a little bit more reined in and a little bit more disciplined in pass coverage. And listen, it's always going to be really, really tough for these guys, these off-ball linebackers to come in and be, 90th percentile or better. It's just one of those positions where the learning curve is so steep. and you have to give them a little bit of grace. You have to give them a little bit of leniency, and you just hope that someone is diligent and who's as committed to this craft as Trent Simpson is will be a lot better in year 3 than he was in year 2.
Are you doing just football, or are you doing more? I saw you did a basketball this week. What's the next couple of weeks look like for you?
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out. Going to meet with the Eds today and figure it out. I mean, obviously, we don't know exactly where Maryland is headed. We know the women probably aren't playing in College Park, which is a bit of a bummer. But I mean, I think that there's a lot of optimism about what this team could be, and potentially being a second weekend team, which is not something that Maryland has really been able to enjoy since the heyday of the Gary era. So it would be great to go back in there and tell a lot of the cool stories that maybe have been overlooked. But we'll see. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
I'm going to pull the curtain back and tell everybody that Griffin had actually booked Jonas for earlier in the show, and then I was like, "Oh, just tell him it's Gary, and he'll be okay." If you tell him it's about Gary, and literally Griffin was like, he said he understood, and I said I knew he would. I knew that would be the case. At Jonas_Schaffer, that's how you follow him. TheBaltimoreBanner.com as well. Always appreciate you, brother. Thanks for hopping on this morning. Let's talk soon, all right?
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Jonas Schaffer with us here on GCR. All right. It is a Friday, and on Fridays, I don't really even know what else has been going on to cover, but Griffin's going to let us know exactly what there has been, as it's time that we do this.
This week in the rest of baseball.
This week in the rest of baseball, brought to you by the print issue of Press Box, which is available for free at your neighborhood Royal Farms, any of the hundreds of locations around town where you find Press Box. Read it all, PressBoxOnline.com. David Rubenstein on the cover. Sit down with Stan and I, lengthy conversation with the Orioles owner. Go find that right now, and you can read it all, PressBoxOnline.com. What's going on in the world of baseball?
I mean, I guess this we did talk about, but I guess it was over the weekend that it was official that Garrett Cole was going to need Tommy John. So that, so obviously that was probably the biggest headline from throughout the week. Garrett Cole going down for the Yankees. That was obviously following the news as well last week that Luis Heel was going to be missing, half.
I think I saw Ken Rosenthal said that they're not interested in bringing in any of the remaining free agent pitchers, which again. There's a twofold to that.
What's out there, yeah.
Right, that's part of it, is you say, okay, well, that makes sense because it's not very good. But that doesn't answer how hell-bent they would be at maybe pursuing a trade. And that's the part that I can't...
Yeah.
When he says they're not interested in the free agent pitchers, because I think one of the questions that I've been asking myself, if the Orioles... And to this point, we've not heard anything that says that they're... The only thing we got was the initial reporting from Rosenthal that the Orioles are looking into options. But even in that, if you go back and reread it, that was from over the weekend, the Athletic story, he doesn't say specifically the Orioles are looking at Kyle Gibbs. It's just sort of vague that they're exploring their options. And in a story where they also talked, it was like, here's part of a story, here's another part of a story, but never put the two parts of the story together. So that's all we have. Most of this is just us hypothesizing the possibility. And as a few people, and Xavier Scruggs yesterday pointed out, perhaps they should be doing this whether or not Grayson Rodriguez is fine. And I guess we're getting into that 7 to 10 day range this weekend that we should maybe learn a little bit more about Grayson Rodriguez. But I say all that to say it would be conceivable that the Yankees would then be your competition for trying to land one of these pitchers if you're trying to do this right now. And particularly if they're not interested in the free agents, which who among us is, then does that make them more inclined to perhaps speed up the process of trying to deal for a Dylan Cease or a Michael King or a Sandy Alcantara, somebody like that?
Yeah, it's who knows what will happen? Obviously, the gut instinct is that, it feels like it's going to make it difficult, or at least make the price a little bit higher. Buster Olney, who obviously we did have her on early in the week, did write about some of the pitching injuries, and obviously last year was an insane number of UCL injuries, UCL surgeries with players. Like over 240 guys, I believe, ended up getting it. Yeah. So they did a report. So in obviously, well, yeah. All right. So there was a report last year. 104 major and minor league pitchers underwent UCL surgeries in 2010. So that was 15 years ago. 104 pitchers. In 2024, that total soared to 281. There we go. Yeah. And that a lot of those were like minor league guys as well, but this covered everything. But
again, because they're doing things that no one has ever done before in the way that they throw the ball. Like, it's funny because I was reading the Earl Weaver book, and like Earl's concept of you need to have the pitchers pitch more because that's how they avoid injury, is by having the throw. And I'm like, that's not based in science. That's just bullshittery. Like, that's all that is. It's just throw something at the wall. Like, I tell you how my guys don't get hurt is we pitch them more. We do a 4-man rotation. We pitch them a lot. Like, that's not. You have no idea. But they also just weren't throwing the ball with the violence that they're throwing the ball these days. And we're also more inclined to, if you have soreness, deal with it, because we think the value of the pitcher is so much more significant. Like, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that are in play, and so something that perhaps you would have just dealt with in a different, like, I don't know that there are actually more pitching injuries now than there were then, because a lot of this stuff would just be stuff that they, whatever. Yeah, I'm a little sore today. I got you.
Right.
I got you, Skip. I'll go out there and throw. So it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, and then so I was trying to get around to the point that so only in this article on ESPN Plus, you should go check it out if you're very interested in the pitching stuff. But Garrett Cole, you cited Garrett Cole, Luis Heel, Grayson Rodriguez he brought up, and that's not necessarily UCL, at least again, knock on everything around you. But he also cited George Kirby, who is also going through has had an injury scare. It sounds not similar, but he got an injection. He had shoulder inflammation, and he got a biologics injection. So I don't know what that means.
Never heard those words before in my life.
Yeah. So now, do you think this could affect the trade market again? We all want Dylan Cease, but
if Castillo was the more logical option, does that take him back off the table because of
the future for George Kirby? At least this season seems very unknown at the moment. So George Kirby dealing with an injury as well.
Totally plausible. The Castillo thing is also, like, yes, to your point, none of us are like, yeah, that's the guy you want to go get. The Orioles, the value obviously is that you have control, right, of Castillo. You have him for a couple more years. Now, he's also in his 30s.
Yeah, I want to say he's 32.
Which doesn't mean that he's ready to expire. I mean, they just signed Charlie Morton for F's sakes.
32, yes.
Look, from a pitching standpoint, we're definitely more interested in Cease and King. It's just the cost versus value that is a hard proposition to figure out, which all goes back to look, I hate that we're still banging the drum of the what were you doing this offseason, but we have to. It's perplexing. It makes no sense. And it was like what I brought up with Jeremy. Jeremy's like, well, you look at some of these pitching contracts and they're just crazy. I'm like, right, but that's the cost.
Yeah.
Like it's the egg price thing. I don't want to pay that much for eggs, but I want eggs. This is the way that it works. There's no. Well, here's the other. Do you think I want to pay this much for gas? You know what I paid for gas when I was a senior in high school?
What, 50 cents?
Not 50. But I legitimately, I remember the cheapest I ever paid was 89 cents for a gallon of gas.
Wow.
I remember it well. But regularly, before 9/11, it was 90 cents, 99 cents, $1, $1.09, somewhere in that range.
Well, it went down close to, it went under 2, during the pandemic?
I did see it, definitely during the pandemic. And then we said, this is how you know that people don't care about you. This is bad for the oil business, so we have to stop producing so much oil, so that gas prices can go back up. And then people wanted to tell me about how, this politician cares about you. The F they do. Yeah, but you don't understand. It's the oil industry that sets the tone for the entire economy. I don't care.
It's like the leadoff hitter, you know?
I care about me. That's what in the moment that gas became affordable, you said, a pox on that. You're not allowed to afford gas. But it's this thing. I don't want to pay that much for gas. You think I have any interest in paying $3.50 a gallon for gas? No. But you know what I want? Gas.
Gas, it's not $3.50 right now.
It's not right now, but it has been.
Yeah.
It definitely has been. I
sure.
paid $3.50 for gas. I probably paid damn near $4 for gas. I was in California at one point. And
Gosh. I mean, it's over $5
I swear to God. I said, how do you live? There, I'm probably oversharing. There was a girl that I sort of used to date, and she had moved to San Francisco, and she had asked for help with moving, right? But she hadn't told me all the details. She was just like, hey, I just got a new place. I could really use help. If you and your wife would want to come out, like we could, go see a little bit of San Francisco. And essentially, I just sort of said, yeah, I'll come out, no problem. Like I'll do it because, you know what? Really, what? Straight.
You want to see San Francisco? Yeah.
No, she got me a backstage. Oh, this is how nerdy. She got me a backstage tour of Pixar.
Nice.
Like she knew a girl that was like a higher up at Pixar, and she was like, "We can go see." And I was like,
"That's pretty cool."
Like I don't know why I'm such a nerd. Like I'm like taking. They have like a Lifeline and like Mike Wazowski. I'm just like, it was so nerdy.
Yeah, that's worth it.
But I went out there to visit, and I didn't realize like
is Pixar in San Francisco, or did you go to L.A. too?
No, we didn't go to L.A. It was in
Pixar is.
It's in what
in San Fran?
In what do they call the technology corridor out
there?
there?
Valley, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Silicon Valley. It's in Silicon Valley is where it is. And so that I'm like, why the hell am I struggling with Silicon Valley? So yeah, we went. Oh, it was amazing. The campus is amazing. It's incredible. Like they just want you to live there more or less. There's every different building has like 2 bars and hangout areas and here's the breakfast nook, and I'm like, God, she's like, yeah, they just want to encourage creativity. So they just basically want you to be in the building all the time. They want you to have parties on Friday nights. They want you to be here constantly. Now this is also a decade ago or whatever it was, so I don't know how things have changed. But the moral of this story is I was out to visit, and gas was legitimately $5.50 or something. Like, how do you live? And what she hadn't told me about moving was when she first moved there for a real job, like moved there for a legitimate job. She was living like more or less in the building where she was working for the first month or so.
So she didn't have to commute. Yeah.
Like they basically was living at she was like, well, I would keep my stuff there. Then I was like crashing on different people's couches for a little while, and she's like, I couldn't afford to live. And I'm like, why did you moved here for a job that you couldn't afford to live? She's like, well, I ultimately was going to be able to, but when I first moved here, no.
Jeez.
And in order to live, she'd like move out to Pacifica, like well outside of San Francisco. This is crazy, and that's why I understood why she needed help moving, is because she was so far out. It was nuts.
Yeah.
Nuts.
So pitcher injuries. Yeah.
Yeah. How did we get there?
I honestly don't know.
The price of gas. Price of gas.
Price of pitchers.
Price of pitchers.
Yeah.
This is why we keep coming back to how absurd the offseason was. You know how much pitchers cost. This is the way the world works. Just saying we fundamentally object to the concept it cannot be the answer. The answer can't be, well, these pitching prices are crazy. Right? You're in baseball. That's what you do. You don't get to say, like, well, we don't want a baseball.
Well, I mean, some teams do. Yeah.
I mean, I understand.
Orioles. A's. Well, I guess the A's. Never mind. The A's are trying to compete.
Yeah, all of a sudden they want a baseball. It's very weird. Go ahead.
The Cubs. I don't know if it's because since they're in that,
How did that just happen? I just told a story about a girl move. What the hell just happened?
This is This Week in the Rest of Baseball. What do you think?
That's what we do.
This is what the people want.
I guess.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, you wanted to see the Giants really bad, and I was like, no.
Well, although we did go to that was how I know about the Giants A's preseason thing. It was in late March, and we did go to, I believe, in Oakland, a Giants A's preseason.
What'd you think of the Coliseum?
Oh, it was God, what a disaster! What a dump! God.
I'm glad I got to see it last year.
We also, speaking of old sports facilities, we also went to.
And that was this was what, like
a decade ago. Yeah,
wow.
2015. I don't think I had a kid yet. I don't think so.
Did they have the jumbotrons there at the Coliseum by then? Like, yeah, they had to have, right?
Yeah,
like,
they did.
Okay.
And then
I thought they were nice. I mean, again, I went last summer, so
I can't remember now that I think about it.
There was like 2
basically
above each foul pole.
I think they did, but don't make
quote
me
you.
swear to that.
All right.
We also did not stay long.
You didn't stay the whole game?
No.
I guess they
we
weren't
didn't stay
playing
the whole game. We didn't stay. I don't think I know that we stayed 2 innings.
I guess they're just playing. Oh, this was the spring training.
Yeah, this
Okay.
was a spring training game that like she got.
I thought you were a sports fan.
She
Sorry.
got like free tickets to, and we like debated for hours as to whether we were gonna go. I remember that being an entire thing as we were like doing the moving.
Did you take the? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe
we did walk across the bridge. We
I
did
just
do that.
I just think it's just really sucks for Oakland, I guess, and that's.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. It has nothing to do with the Coliseum. We also saw the Cow Palace. There was like a tattoo convention going on. And we were driving by, and I was like, "Is that the Cow Palace, where famously like the Warriors used to play?" And she was like, "Yeah, I've never been there." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And she said, "You should see if there's something going on." And I was like, "All right." So I looked it up, and I was like, "There's a tattoo convention." She's like, "Let's go check it out, just to go see the Cow Palace." It's it's an actual like sports arena, but it's also like exists for the sake of cat. It's like a very weird.
I still don't think I understand. That
it still exists. Like it's still
the arena right next to.
No. This is not in Oakland. This is in San Francisco,
okay.
or I think near maybe Daly City or something like that might be where it is. But the Cow Palace, it was the arena. Like that's the sports arena that they used years ago, and yet Daly City. It hosted the San Francisco Warriors from 1962 to 1964, and then again from 66 to 71. And then they played the 1970 finals. It had already moved to Oakland, but they came back to play the 1975 NBA finals. Oh my God, what a time. They had to do that because the Oakland Coliseum was booked for the Ice Follies performance. They had to move the NBA finals.
To
a different arena. It's such a weird. It's a livestock pavilion and a major sports
San Francisco,
arena.
yeah.
It's a weird. It's like, and I knew the history of the place. There have been a lot of like famous pro wrestling events there over the years. So I was like, that's the Cow Palace. It's
like
still
the
there.
Farm Museum out in Westminster.
Yeah, but like imagine if that was where they played the NBA finals.
That'd be pretty cool.
It's the Ag Center, right?
Yeah,
It's just so. It's such a weird anomaly within sports history that I was like, I want to go look at it. So we wandered into a tattoo convention.
Nice.
Weird times.
It was Grateful Dead night again when we went.
This week and the rest of Glenn's trip to San Francisco.
Again, nothing else really matters, I guess, in baseball outside that. The Cubs again. I guess because they're playing in Tokyo, so maybe that's why I'm seeing slightly extra Cubs stuff. But Pete Crow Armstrong having an incredible spring. For anybody, he's batting at least earlier in the week. He was batting like well over 500 through like the first 2.5 weeks of spring training, like 540. Was Pete Crow Armstrong, so maybe he's due for a big year.
Or it means absolutely nothing.
It means he's due for a big year.
Or it could mean absolutely
which
nothing.
also must mean that Matt Shaw must be doing really well, says the Cubs announced. Craig Counsell said that he said that he will travel to Japan, so maybe that doesn't mean he's got a long-term spot on the roster, but
that's early because they're playing exhibition games there this weekend. So that's Monday. Is that Monday? Is that
when the actual? Yeah, I think it is Monday that the actual games are. The Japan games, MLB, and that will be
18th and 19th. So yes.
So yeah, Tuesday.
But
Tuesday and Wednesday.
I assume that early Tuesday morning, like 6 a.m. type of deal is what I'm guessing. Yeah,
Give us
6:10 a.m.
Nice. All right. Wake up in baseball.
On Tuesday on Fox at 6:10 a.m. and then Wednesday on FS1 at 6:10 a.m.
Great. Perfect. Can't wait to watch the last
if you're in LA,
3 innings of that
at 3 a.m. It's like the Australian Open final. There's no way for it.
Or I guess 4 a.m. for the Chicago. Or sorry, not 4 a.m. 5 a.m. for the Chicago fans. But yeah.
They're both not Eastern.
No.
It's very weird.
But yeah, so the Cubs doing stuff that good for Matt Shaw, former Maryland shortstop. So hopefully maybe he was the AA MVP last year or something and got called up late to AAA.
Hell of a player.
Yes. So good for Matt Shaw. This was fun. The Kansas Jayhawks baseball team they hit 5 home runs in a row, back-to-back jacks against the Minnesota Gophers. By the way, this was on Wednesday. By the way, they were playing at the Viking. Is that Bank of America?
Yes, they do that because they used to play in the Metrodome years ago.
Okay,
and then
obviously it's Minnesota in like early March, but yeah,
right. They moved. The Twins did an outdoor baseball stadium, which is not an option for February and March baseball. Well, it's not really an option in April, but they do it anyway. So they basically concoct like a stadium within the football stadium.
And it looks pretty cool because I was watching the highlights. I was like, okay, it looks kind of normal, and then all of a sudden they're like back, the wide shot, and it's like, oh my god, there's empty rows of purple seats.
Yeah, I have
going up a mile.
Some like weird, I don't know, bizarre things I can find when I end up on like a rabbit hole on the internet. Watching do you remember a few years ago they did an exhibition game at the LA Coliseum, a baseball game?
Yeah, kind of.
The left field line was like 200 feet. Like it was like nothing.
Like Ebbets Field and
kind of
the Polo Grounds, not
Polo
the
Grounds.
Polo Grounds.
It was like 200, and they just instead put up like a 1,000-foot wall. It was so stupid. Like, why can't you just say we can't do this?
Polo Grounds was always where we played in MLB The Show. We just
always
Polo Grounds.
Runs, right, 100%.
Or you hit it, 500 feet dead center, and it's still not a home run.
Yeah.
I'm showing a highlight of one of the home runs that was hit at the Viking Stadium. Looks freaky.
I haven't really spent time like looking at that.
And also the angles are so like.
I think that
it's like they're on the moon watching the game.
I want to say like one of the like North Dakota State or somebody like that does something similar with their indoor facility where they like force a baseball field into it somehow to start the season. It doesn't really make any sense. I don't.
We're slowly covering because I also wanted to point out this. That was only the 4th time that a Division I team ever hit 5 straight home runs in a game, back to backs. It was 2006 was the last time, which was of course South Carolina Gamecocks in the College World Series. They actually hit 5 straight. Yeah, June of 2006 for South Carolina. Eastern Illinois did it in 1998. And the first team to do this in 1992, I guess they're no longer a D1 baseball team, but Centenary in L.A. Or does that mean Louisiana?
Probably.
Because all it says is in commas L.A., so I guess that would be Louisiana, not Los Angeles.
The Coliseum, it was 250 feet to left field. 250.
That's reasonable. It's like Century High School in obviously in Carroll County. They have left field wall was like maybe 260, 270. It's kind of a joke. It's a very short porch at Century High School, and we always hated playing there because they build their lineups to take advantage of it.
Apparently at the U.S. Bank Stadium, it's 328 to left field, so it's not real. Like it's not embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's still a short porch, but it's not embarrassingly so.
There was a little bit of a scare in Kansas City. Bobby Witt was hit by a pitch on the hand this week, or the wrist, I guess. And I think they were fearing the worst, that it was broken, but apparently X-rays came back negative. No fracture for Bobby Witt, just a forearm contusion. So
honestly, as I look at the way that it's set up, it kind of reminds me of the old Metrodome. Like they always called it the Baggy Dome because they like had the kind of plastic covering over the seats. They don't have that here, but it's because the seats are up in right field the way that they were at the Metrodome, and then there were actual seats. And my father and I went to a game at the Metrodome that David Wells pitched for the Blue Jays. I don't know what year this would have been. I would have been in high school. Twice when I was in high school, my parents made me drive across the country in a van with them, which allowed me to see things in the country that I would have never seen them. Like we went to the Alamo and stuff like that. But being cooped up in a van with my parents and my sister when I was in high school was just very difficult.
Not that bad road trips. Come on.
It was something they were into. And I remember we were in Minnesota. My mother lived in Minnesota. My mother was a military brat, so she lived in a few different places growing up. But one of them was in Minnesota, and she happened to be neighbors with Harmon Killebrew. So, it was so random. We were at the Mall of America, and they have like a famous, because Mall of America sits where the old Twin Stadium was.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so some historic home run that Harmon Killebrew hit, the seat they have like positioned on a wall inside Mall of America, like allegedly where the seat would have been
height
in the stadium, right?
Latitude, longitude,
something like allegedly. Who knows if it's actually true or not? But my mother didn't know this, and like we're walking through this, I'm like looking up at the wall. I'm like, why is there a seat on the wall? Like this doesn't make sense. And we went over and we read this plaque, and it was some famous Harmon Killebrew home run, and my mother started crying. And I'm just like, what in the world? And she had never told me that like growing up when they lived in Minnesota, they were neighbors with Harmon Killebrew, and he was like this very special man who was incredibly kind to them and would let them come over. And I'm like, holy crap. It's like the coolest thing you've ever said to me. Why did you?
Just waiting for that moment.
Yeah, like,
this was all part of the plan.
How did this never come up in conversation?
It was get you just kind of used to doing these long road trips, and then just so that she could finally build up to this point.
So then I like emotionally convinced her that like instead of whatever dumb thing we were gonna do in Minnesota the next day, that like we should go to a Twins game. And she had no interest, but my dad and I went. Saw the Metrodome. I saw the Metrodome for a football game too.
I thought it was something Buster Olney reported that apparently the Blue Jays and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. were about $50 million apart.
Oh, that's just in the margins.
On
really.
there, yeah, exactly.
Like this, you just move a few.
So I guess he wanted. It sounds like the way it was reported that he wanted 14 years, like a 14-year deal almost. And so if it was 14 years, that means they were about $3.5 million apart per year. If it was $50 million in total, I mean, yeah. But it sounds like they were not close. So who knows what will happen next for Vladdy Jr. Another we did talk about it with Drew, I think, but another local guy, obviously Gavin Sheets out in San Diego. The reports, the headline that I saw was that he is mashing his way into a roster spot in spring with San Diego.
That be the case?
More fun. Well, actually, this one's not quite as fun, at least not for us. The Red Sox, their big three, they had their spring breakout game yesterday, I think, against the Rays. And Marcelo Mayer, Christian Campbell, Roman Anthony. Go ahead and remember those names. All three of them hit home runs yesterday. Those are the top three, or maybe not in that specific order, but they are the three of the top
Mayer
prospects.
the same draft as Jackson Holiday?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
I mean, this would be a normal time frame for him to be.
Yeah.
Like Jackson Holiday had the elevated timeline. Or the what am I
he was the number 4 pick in the 21 draft. So that was the year before.
Oh, a year before Jackson.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that was Cowser?
Yeah.
So he was 1 pick before Cowser?
Okay.
Or no, what pick was Cowser? Kjerstad was 5?
Kjerstad was
2.
2.
Okay, Kjerstad was 2. Cowser was 5 then. So he was 1 pick before Cowser. Okay. Marcelo Mayer, but yeah, these are guys that, for people that don't know, I'm helping Stan out with his fantasy draft. These are 3 guys that I'm probably...
You're the consultant.
Yeah, these are 3 guys I'm probably going to be like, hey, Stan, we're going to shelf out whatever we need for these guys.
Yeah, with Stan being a little banged up, you might have to be the big dog.
But yeah, the future looks unfortunately bright for the Red Sox. Fun things, though, Shohei Ohtani, he's coming to Fortnite.
What?
Shohei Ohtani, a playable character in Fortnite now. You can be Shohei Ohtani and win your victory royale.
I didn't know people still played Fortnite.
It's because they went back to classic mode, so it's like building is not, you can still build, but it's not like and they went back to the old map as well. It's like which apparently, by the way, Warzone, Call of Duty, they're going back to the old map as well, which is also I'm kind of pumped about that because
you're prepared to lose hours.
Yeah, I think so because over COVID, Warzone might have saved my life during COVID because we were just...
You and every professional athlete.
Yeah.
That's all they were doing. I kept checking in with them. Hey, what have you guys been doing? Playing Call of Duty.
Oh, man, Warzone was great.
If
they're going back to...
there was never a better time. There was never a better time for this show because everybody had time.
Right.
So, like, every football player, every baseball, they all had plenty of time. We could have anybody we wanted on at that point.
But you did every now and then get a note that was like, hey, I'm playing... Call of Duty.
Well, it wasn't. No, it was just we talk. I'd be like, "Hey, what are you doing to pass the time?" And every single one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Call of Duty. They were all playing Call of Duty.
Yeah. The thing that bummed me out though is that this is this week in the rest of baseball.
I'm telling you, guys that we were never able to get on. Other than Lamar, I don't think came on. But like guys that we were never able to, like J.K. Dobbins, who apparently didn't like doing interviews. It's like, all right, yeah, I got time. I'll do it.
Thanks, J.K.
Like, we could have whoever we wanted on.
I don't know when they got rid of it or why they did, but they took out all of like our classes in Call of Duty. So like all the war, like you had like your what guns you had and like your tactical, like everything in part of your specific class. They like reset it. I don't know why they did that, but that really pissed me off.
This week in the Cow Palace, Glenn's mom crying and Call of Duty.
The rest of this week and the rest of Call of Duty. Yeah.
Right.
The rest.
Can we wrap?
The Pirates.
I have a busy weekend ahead. Can we wrap?
But you like doing the show, I thought.
I do, but can we please wrap?
Last thing, teams were announcing their theme nights. We talked about the Orioles. The Pirates are doing a backyard baseball night, which looks pretty cool. They had
that was too young for me. Like when it came, like it was beneath. I don't want to say beneath. That's
okay. I get it.
Shut up. That's not what I meant to say. It was.
You're too cool for
below
backyard baseball.
my age, but everybody loved it.
Yeah.
All of
but so I'm sure. So they're making all the players.
And it wasn't
backyard
far below
characters.
my age. It was like 5 or 7 years, maybe below my age. Like
backyard baseball, pretty good. I mean, all the backyard sports. So.
Yeah, just not for me specifically. That's all. All right, very good. That's this week and the rest of whatever.
That's everything on our minds this week.
If you've missed any of Stan and Luke's coverage from down in Sarasota, you can find it at facebook.com/PressBoxSports, PressBoxOnline.com, all brought to you by HelpMyGamblingProblem.org, Easy Pass, the Costas Inn, and Live Casino and Hotel. Let's get a tidbit.
Tidbit-wise, want to make sure I didn't miss any college basketball stuff, because yesterday was a fun college basketball day. There was a lot of close games going down to the wire.
I saw Dafe Owe's brother.
Yeah, so Tega Owe, his third game-winning shot in the final minute or something. His second game winner against Oklahoma, because he played for Oklahoma last year. But yeah, Otega Odafe Owe was in attendance, and
that's cool.
And he put a video on his story.
Congratulations, Morgan State, Mount St. Mary's, both winners last night. We'll get into that in tubular, but they both remain alive in the semifinals in the MAC and the MEAC, or the other way around, MEAC and MAC, respectively.
Otega Owe, only Division I player this century to score 25 points and make the game-winning basket in 2 separate 1-point wins against the same opponent in the same season again. I mean, this is so, and he did, again, both against his former team, Oklahoma. So that was pretty.
Let's reach out to them.
Okay, got it.
Put that on the list.
And then yesterday, we'll keep the basketball theme going, but in the NBA, as Steph Curry, make sure I pull up the link here. Steph Curry made his 4,000th three-pointer.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
4,000th three-pointer.
I thought you guys were out here telling me Steph Curry couldn't shoot.
Who's next?
Who's next?
Yeah, who's next most three-pointers?
Ray Allen, right?
Nope.
No, it's not.
Next on the list has 3,100.
Was it Ray Allen at some point? Somebody else passed him?
Yeah, it would have been. Ray Allen is third. And we can do the.
So it's somebody else that's active.
We want to do the top 10, top 5.
So is it Harden?
Yes, James Harden is second on the list.
Because
only
when Steph
870 behind.
When Steph broke the record, he broke Ray Allen's record. Yeah. What are we doing? How many?
I mean, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get the top 10. I guess it might take a little longer, obviously. So you want to do in the interest of time.
Let's see. Clay.
Clay is top 5. Yes, he is 5th.
I'll say LeBron just because.
LeBron is 7th.
Remember, early on in his career, he wasn't even a very good three-point shooter. Harden, Allen. So I've got half of the top 10.
Yes, yeah, Allen, Harden.
Reggie Miller.
Reggie Miller is 6th. LeBron is 18 behind Reggie for now.
How about Joe Johnson?
No Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson is 20th.
Really? That's a little surprising.
He is just under 2,000.
The man invented ISO, he's ISO Joe. He invented the... Lillard.
Damian Lillard is 4th.
Okay.
All time. He is behind Ray Allen. He's still little. He's 180 behind Ray Allen.
I mean, I don't think it is, but I'll just say Michael Jordan to get it off the...
No MJ.
Yeah. Wrong era.
Yeah, top 25. No MJ.
Yeah, I mean, they all have to be.
Yeah.
He might have even at the beginning of his career. He might have.
There was no 3. Yeah, because at least in the NCAA championship, right?
Yeah, there was
no 3.
But I don't know what year it came to the NBA exactly. What year did the NBA 3-point line? Oh my God! Adopt. I should have used that. Adopt the
1980 season.
Okay, so it was before he was there.
79 season. Yeah.
All right. Anyway,
couldn't adapt, huh?
Right? Yeah. What a loser. But it wasn't the era of basketball where everybody just took threes.
Right.
Is the point that I'm trying to make. That didn't come along for a little while. I don't think it's Gilbert Arenas, although he did make quite a few of them.
Not Gilbert Arenas.
Durant.
Durant is not in the top 10. He is 14th, though.
Son of a bitch. Kyle Korver?
Kyle Korver is behind LeBron James, 8th all time. 3-pointers made. Missing
made
9
a lot
of
of three.
10. Yeah.
Glenn Rice, I don't think. I mean, I just associate him because he won all the 3-point contests.
One active, one non-active.
One active, one non-active. One active, one non-active.
Promise he's active.
Yeah. It's been a bit of an adventure for us. One active. All right. God. Jimmy Butler.
Not Jimmy Butler.
Kawhi.
Not Kawhi.
Russell Westbrook.
No Russ.
Yikes.
These guys are...
Chris Paul somehow. He only hits mid-range jumpers.
No Chris Paul.
Trae Young already.
No, not yet.
Probably going to get there eventually. Kyrie.
Kyrie, no. He's top 25, though.
Paul George.
Paul George is
really?
9th. Yep, 9th most 3-pointers made. Well done. Of bonus points, what team is Paul George on?
Philly, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But aren't they like threatening that they're going to trade him?
Probably. I mean, they're going to threaten every other day that they're going to trade somebody.
And then one that's not active. Dwayne Wade.
Not Dwayne Wade.
Carmelo Anthony.
Not Carmelo.
Boy. Paul Pierce.
Not Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce is top 15, though.
Cool. I don't know. Clyde Drexler. Peja.
Who is that?
Peja Stojakovic.
No, not him. Do not do it. Am I supposed? Should I know who Peja is?
Peja Stojakovic was an assassin for the Kings, man.
How do I spell it? Peja.
P-E-J-A.
Educate myself.
P-E-J-A. I think his son is playing for Cal, maybe.
Peja Stojakovic.
I feel like there was a lot of Peja Stojakovic content this week. It's probably the reason why I thought of him. Scottie Pippen.
Not Scotty.
Tracy McGrady.
No Tracy.
Grant Hill.
No Grant Hill.
Vince Carter.
Vince Carter, number 10.
Well, that's purely
time.
he just played for. I got another year in me situation.
He is
because he was not a lethal 3-point shooter. He was a dunker, obviously.
Jason Terry was 8 behind him.
Jason Terry. Wow.
Yeah, top 11. Then you got Jamal Crawford. Kyle Lowry is in the top 13.
Wow, Kyle Lowry.
Yeah,
I mean, he stuck around for a long time too.
But he healed top 16 here
already.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. We got to get tubular. We got to go. Jesus.
Have you ever thought of taking a cruise to these wonderful destinations with sunny skies and beautiful beaches? Well, wait no longer. We're ready for you to cruise from the Cruise Maryland Terminal.
Have a little phrase that you can go from baggage to margarita in about 15 minutes.
Choose fun with an array of destinations, onboard activities, entertainment, and world-class cuisine.
Contact your travel agent and book your cruise today. Let your adventure begin.
All right, here's what's coming up totally tubular-wise. It's a lot this weekend. We'll try to go over the stuff that matters. Big Ten Tournament tonight, BTN, Illinois, Maryland, 6:30. There was like 200 combined points between Illinois and Iowa yesterday. Just
basketball.
Also, keep in mind, again, like Maryland did win at Illinois, but they were without...
Jonas, right?
Yes, correct. Not that I think that means that Illinois should be favored tonight, but just,
Maryland still does play well. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
well,
it seems typically
to not matter.
at Illinois. Though.
Yeah,
like not normal, not in general
Neutral.
against Illinois, but more at Illinois. Who was it? Was it Coburn who was like?
Oh, Kofi Coburn
was like taunting Maryland after they finally won a game against Maryland.
Was that in College Park?
I think it was.
Was that? Yeah.
MEAC tournament semifinals: Morgan State, Norfolk State, 6 o'clock on ESPN Plus tonight. As Morgan tries to reach the championship game tomorrow. And ESPN News at 8:30 tonight, Mount St. Mary's and Merrimack in Atlantic City in the MAC semifinals. Also tonight, Maryland USF Baseball, 6:30 on ESPN+. The Callum Robinson Mustang Classic already underway over at Mustang Stadium. Stevenson-Lynchburg tonight at 8:30 over at GoMaxSports.tv and Lacrosse TV this weekend for the Classic. 5 games throughout the day, today and tomorrow. Orioles are on the radio tonight on BAL against the Twins. David Festa and Tomoyuki Sugano, the pitching matchup there. Everything else for tonight, go find it at GlennClarkRadio.com. Tomorrow, Maryland, Virginia Lacrosse at 4 on ACC Network. Monumental for Delaware Towson Lacrosse at noon. ESPN Plus for Vermont UMBC Lacrosse at 11 a.m. Loyola BU lacrosse. Loyola badly needing a win at noon tomorrow on ESPN Plus, and Hopkins Navy lacrosse tomorrow night at 7 on ESPN Plus. Tomorrow, again, another full day of lacrosse on both GoMaxSports.tv and Lacrosse TV, including Griffin actually has the big one tomorrow. Tufts RIT. Probably the.
Actually, no, I don't have.
Oh, that's not yours.
Yeah, that's Jake.
Then you suck.
I guess so. I know.
It's just the way it goes.
So blame the director, I guess, of the broadcasting over there.
I thought you had the first game tomorrow. You have the second game tomorrow.
I have the first game tomorrow.
Tufts RIT is the fourth game. You don't have the first and the fourth games. Have you been preparing for the wrong?
I mean, I
wait.
Hope
Which
not.
game? Which game? You have the.
I watched in Lee and
yeah, that's the first game.
Yeah,
that's the 11:30 game.
Yeah.
So you have. I thought you had the second game for some reason.
No. Okay. Gotcha.
All right. No, nothing to see here. No panic at all. MLB Network tomorrow night for the spring breakout game between the Yankees and the Orioles at 6:00. Radio and Pittsburgh video on MLB TV tomorrow afternoon for Orioles Pirates. Thaddeus Ward, whatever that is, against Carmen Wladzinski. Hopefully, he's a great pitcher. If Maryland wins tonight, they'll play tomorrow at 3:30 on CBS in the Big Ten Tournament. And if Morgan wins tonight, they would play tomorrow at 1 on ESPN2 in the MEAC title game. If Mount St. Mary's were to win, they will play, of course, in the MAC Championship tomorrow night, 7:30 on ESPNU. On Sunday, the Big Ten Championships at 3:30 on CBS. Of course, the selection show is at 6. ESPN has the women's selection show at 8 o'clock Sunday night. Big Ten Network Plus for Michigan, Maryland women's lacrosse at 1 on Sunday. I can't do all of this. There's 2 Orioles games on Sunday. Just go to GlennClarkRadio.com, find it all there. Non-sports, anything in particular?
A couple things, I guess.
Hopefully we'll actually see the Gemstones on Righteous Gemstones this week. Not that I was mad about last week.
New episode of Severance. Dope Thief is out on Apple TV Plus as well. The first couple episodes with, this is the Brian Tyree Henry and Wagner Mora, who was Pablo Escobar in Narcos. And they're robbing drug dealers until they rob the wrong drug dealers, and now they're trying to fight for their lives. Brian Tyree Henry, though, looks solid. The Electric State on Netflix, going straight to movie, straight to streaming with Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt. That's like the robot thing, the retro, like futuristic robot thing. Yeah,
I think I'm good.
Well, it's Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I like them.
Bill Burr has a special out on Hulu, Drop Dead Ears. Bill Burr on Hulu. So if you're a Bill Burr guy, check it out. The Americas, of course, new one of that with Tom Hanks narrating the stuff. We're on the Gulf Coast. So we'll see what they decide to call it. The Gulf of whatever, you know. And White Lotus, Gemstones, Yellow Jackets, 1923, all that Sunday.
Lady Gaga hosting SNL, right?
That was last week.
That was last week?
Yeah.
God, what did I?
I think they're. I think.
Oh, I did watch
this
that.
week. Yeah.
Did I not watch it? I think I did watch it.
Yeah, because it was. I don't know. It wasn't. Nothing.
Well, no, I definitely watched it. I did.
Yeah.
I did. So there's no SNL this week?
I don't think
they came back for 2 weeks.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they be on this week?
Well, because it's championship weekend in college basketball and the Mustang Classic.
Does that mean they're not going to be on at all during the NCAA tournament? Do we not get SNL for a month?
I know that Lauren is a big college basketball fan.
This is very weird that there's no, or is it maybe a St. Patrick's Day thing, or like
maybe. When is SNL?
I don't know.
Back?
I don't know why they
did a Kendrick Perkins thing last update.
Yeah, they did. I did enjoy that with Keenan as Kendrick Perkins. Yeah. Luke Duke is always hurt. He's gonna be dead by April.
I mean, it's definitely off this week. I'm trying to figure out when it will be back. Centerland episode. These are from like months ago. I don't want the schedule from last year.
Whatever. The answer is we don't know. All right. Thanks today to Gary Williams, Duane Simpkins, Kyle Stackpole, Jonas Schaffer. We'll get all of it up in the greatest hits section of the
Can You Take Me Higher?
tab at GlennClarkRadio.com. On come Monday, no Rita and Glenn Sunday because of conference championship.
I thought Drew, because Drew show made sure.
But I mean, he might be on though. Apparently, I guess they can't air the Big Ten championship game unless Maryland is in it. So if they're not in it, then Drew will be on. If they are in it, obviously he won't be. It's a whole thing.
Good for Drew.
So we'll be back on Monday. Is the point? I know Maryland First Lady Dawn Moore is joining us. Tell us a little bit more about the big Preakness Festival. And stuff and things. We'll obviously do some college hoops reaction on Monday. After
we will fill out our bracket, yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing. We're going to break down the Maryland-Florida State game coming up on Monday. I don't think Florida State's going to make it. Just got a funny feeling. Thanks to everybody at Pressbox.
Yeah, you're right. They won't.
Yeah, and there will be a bat around Saturday or Sunday at 5 o'clock. Thanks to everybody at Pressbox, all of our great sponsors and partners, including Live Casino and Hotel, Cruise Maryland, Crown Trophy, Easy Pass, HelpMyGamblingProblem.org, Costa Sin, MSAA, Maryland Sports, the Baltimore Orioles, your local Toyota dealer, buyatoyota.com. Thanks to Griffin at Griffin_Bass. Follow us, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Glenn Clark Radio. Have a great weekend. Go Maryland, go Morgan, go Mount St. Mary's, go all the lacrosse teams. Duke sucks.